Okay, let's going to start. This afternoon, we're going to start again Africa. This is last week I show you conspiracy theory. This is a very interesting conspiracy theory. That last week Gaddafi, he was not wrong. America was wrong. Okay, and Gaddafi tried to make all African currency, and he organized African countries unification. So also France tried to get oil from Libya. So America and France did try to attack him to kill. And also Gaddafi, he didn't like World Bank and IMF because of oil. He has no debt, and he has money, and he is very influential to African countries. So that kind of his activity, America and France hate him. Okay, so he was killed by France and America. This is last week, that's a video that I show you. But this week, Engdahl is a very similar video, the content, but he's not a conspiracy theorist. But he is a very famous person, in the professor of Princeton University. Then what the title is Arab Spring, a Western ploy to control Eurasia. Okay, Western ploy. This is 2011. The ultimate goal of the U.S. is to take the resources of Africa and Middle East under military control to block economic growth in China and Russia, thus taking the whole of Eurasia under control, author and historian William F. Engdahl reveals. Okay? So, just his explanation following. He wrote a book. And also, beforehand, you had a look about his background. これは2003年のイラク攻略の後、中東と北アフリカの民主化をブッシュは提唱していた。2001年ではその指導者がアメリカの指示でかなりの訓練を受けていた。ということは、要するに民主化のデモはもう、もともとアメリカが仕組んだ罠だっていうことですね。その第一は USSR が崩壊して、中東にクウェートのような金持ちがたくさんいたからだ。世界銀行とか IMF がそこから略奪しようとした。第二はロシアと中国をはじめとしたユーラシアが中東の資源に目をつけた。アメリカはリビア、南スーダンを正常な状態に持っていこうとしたのではなく、とりあえず傀儡政権を作ろうとしていた。2006年から中国がアフリカに多大な投資をし始めた。こうしたことはそれまで IMF ができなかったことだ。今までアメリカ、イラクとかアフガニスタンとかの戦争の費用は、中国がアメリカの債券を買い続けてきたから賄うことができた。中国に3兆ドルありますよね。リザーブ。次の資金源としてアラブの石油の富をアメリカは狙った。ギリシャの危機もアメリカが企んで、アメリカのドルの準備金を守るためだった。ヨーロッパはアメリカと違って、実質的な経済健全だからユーロに問題は起こらない。フランスのサルコジは反乱軍に武器を提供して、石油権を、これリビアね、狙っていた。アフガニスタンにはアメリカの17の空軍基地があるが、これらはタリバンの攻撃のためではなくて、10年以上経ってから将来も起こるかもしれないロシアとか中国との戦争のためだ。リビアへのアメリカのスタンスもという。これはどうかなちょっと、まあ17の空軍基地あるの、これはアフガニスタンの現在の利権をね、トランプが狙ってるんであって、将来とはもう、あんまりそうじゃないと僕は思いますけどね。feed off, intact. これはしょっちゅう出てきますね。intact. instigator. シージュアする。これもよく出てきます。シージュアする。outpour. これ出てこない。plunder. しょっちゅう出てきます。cohesino. あんま聞いたことない。dire straits. outpost. これもしょっちゅう出ますね。resurface. これは、コバルトじゃないかな。 コブ、W いらないね。それからワーフェア、デトネイト、これはしょっちゅう出ますね。デトネイト、爆発させる。インサレクション、インサレクション。OK、これは、またこれ今、いろいろ書いてあるようにですね、非常に面白いビデオですね。OK, just let's have a look. Okay, so
today we're talking to F. William Engdahl, the author of several books, among them Gods of Money, Wall Street, and The Death of American Century. And he is also a political risk consultant. So we're going to today we're talking to F. William Engdahl, the author of several books.
これは、なんだっけな。彼女有名なロシアテレビの、なんだっけな名前。なんて言ったっけな。ソフィーですね。で、もともとロシアテレビの、キャスターだったんだけど、独立して専属契約になって、ソフィーですね。あと、ソフィアかなソフィー。まあいいや。Okay, let's go into start. Very interesting.
Books, among them Gods of Money, Wall Street, and The Death of American Century. And he is also a political risk consultant. So we're going to discuss several of the most burning political and economic issues in the world today. Mr. Engdahl, thank you very much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
To start off, basically, never before has the world faced so many economic and political problems all at the same time. Would you say that these conflicts, which we're seeing today, in terms of euro and the dollar situation, and what's happening in Northern Africa and in the Middle East, do these conflicts feed off each other? Are they somehow related, or not particularly?
What I see in all these conflicts, the decision to bomb Libya, the crisis with the dollar, the crisis with the American economy, and the conduct of American foreign policy in the last period is all part of a breakdown of an entire superpower structure that was built up after the end of the World War II. And nobody in Washington wants to admit, just as nobody in Britain 100 years ago wanted to admit that the British Empire was in terminal decline. All of this is related to the attempt to keep this sole superpower not only intact, but to spread its influence over the rest of the planet. And that, not surprisingly, much of the world is not too eager to see that.
So would you say that what's happening in the Middle East or Northern Africa right now is basically an attempt on the behalf of the United States to keep its game up?
Very much so. The plan was first announced by George W. Bush when he was president just after the invasion of Iraq in 2003 at a G8 meeting, and it was called the Greater Middle East Project. And that project, they published a map of what they had in mind, was the control and the democratization, as they call it, of the entire Islamic world from Afghanistan.
Okay, this is a very key point. This is democratization. This kind of sort of false flag, last week was saying, false flag, intentionally kind of manipulating opinion or concept to persuade world people. Actually, not democratization. Just America wanted to invade Libya, right? Or Afghanistan. Sorry, I just, wrong button, I just saw this one. No. Oh. Okay, that, I don't need. Okay.
Afghanistan, Pakistan, down through Iran, Syria, the Persian Gulf area, the oil-producing states there, and across North Africa all the way to Morocco. And the events, the so-called Arab Spring, have been planned years back, and the instigators of those...
Okay, carefully to listen. Arab Spring, America said, for democratization. This is a lie. Okay. Also, Arab Spring in Libya, demonstrators well-educated, Syria the same, well-educated by maybe ICIA. Okay.
Those so-called spontaneous protests, these Twitter revolts in Cairo and Tunisia and so forth over the last months, have all been pre-organized assiduously.
Pre-organized.
Some of the people, leaders of
some of the people, leaders,
the protests have been trained in Belgrade in Serbia by
Belgrade, Serbia. Outside those countries, they are very well trained, maybe by CIA.
A poor activist financed by the U.S. State Department.
Okay, activist financed by U.S. State Department.
This thing has State Department and U.S. intelligence all over it. And why are they doing this? Well, two things in my view. One, there is vast wealth in the hands of the leading circles in the Arab world. Vast wealth. Sovereign wealth funds.
Okay, one reason is the vast wealth. They are very rich.
Of countries like Kuwait and other countries, but also just the resources. And one of
resources is oil.
The agendas is to introduce, as was done in the Soviet Union after 1991, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the agenda of IMF privatization, free market economy, and so forth, so that Western banks and financial agencies and corporations could come in and take the plunder. The second agenda is...
Plunder is
militarily, in places such as Libya or South Sudan, now the so-called Republic of South Sudan, to militarize those oil sources that are directly strategic to China's future economic growth. So this is all about controlling Eurasia, something Zbigniew Brzezinski talked about it back in 1997 in his famous book, The Grand Chess Game, and controlling especially Russia and China and any potential cohesion of the Eurasia.
Oh, this spell is wrong. Cohesion.
Countries economically and politically.
But as a result of the so-called Arab Spring, well, can we honestly say that Middle East and Northern African countries, which have gone through with the changes, have they really become more democratic?
Egyptian.
Okay, this is a good question.
And Tunisian friends of mine say that it's just the opposite. The economy is in far worse shape. Libya had the highest living standard in all of Africa before the bombings of NATO. Today, the country is in ruins because of those bombings, not because of Gaddafi.
Okay, eliminate Gaddafi. What happened? Libya lost everything. Lost highly standard of living gone. America did it, right?
The economy of Egypt is in dire straits. The military...
Dire straits.
remains in control. The military high command of Egypt was sitting in the Pentagon when the revolts kicked off and waited for a signal from the Pentagon when to return and take control of those events.
So, well, the instigators of the conflicts, who seem to be, the United States and maybe some of the European powers, if we, look at Libya, will they be able to restore normality in these countries, or is it not even in their interest?
I don't think they give a moment's thought to normality or normalization. I think what their concern is, especially the Pentagon, is military control. The next step will be in this so-called Transitional National Council in Libya is to have that puppet government give NATO permanent basing rights inside Libya, something they never had before under Gaddafi. South Sudan, a similar thing. They're defenseless unless they have NATO forces in there. The AFRICOM is coordinating this, the Pentagon's Africa Command, which was, interestingly enough, created just after China's 2006 Africa diplomacy, where 40 heads of African nations were invited to Beijing, and enormous deals were signed with the Chinese companies for oil exploration, to build hospitals, give soft loans, everything the IMF didn't do in Africa in the last 30 years, the Chinese began doing, and that had enormous results for China.
I know that you have a very interesting opinion on this. Who would you say pays for wars waged by the United States?
Well, you have to go back to the role in the last 20 or 30 years, actually it began in the 80s, with the role of the dollar as world reserve currency. And China has an enormous trade surplus. Walmart is essentially an outpost of Chinese manufacturing in America today. So the 300 billion plus of surplus dollars that the Central Bank of China amasses every year, what do you do with that? Well, there's few markets big enough to invest in. Supposedly they could buy gold for their central bank reserves, which they are doing, by the way. But the only place they can invest it, as they see it right now, or until very recently, is either in dollars or in the euro. They've got something like $3 trillion of US dollar treasury bonds or bills as their reserves today. So, in effect, the US would not be able to finance the deficits that they're running to wage those wars in Afghanistan or wage those wars in Iraq or in Libya, unless the Chinese were buying U.S. Treasury bonds. So ironically, the Chinese are financing wars directed against Chinese national interests for energy security.
Would you say the United States is going to, has any chance of resurfacing from the crisis that it's finding itself in right now?
The only way, as they see it, they can survive and keep the dollar as their instrument, Wall Street I'm talking about, is the gods of money, as I call it in my book, is to find new areas of loot. So the Arab Spring is directed against grabbing and privatizing the vast wealth of the Arab oil world and the Arab world generally, just as the use of the IMF in the former Soviet Union was consciously designed by Wall Street and by Washington in order to plunder the vast resources of Russia and the former Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact countries.
So if the dollar does not retain its superior status, do you think there is any likelihood that the euro will retain it, or inherit it, rather?
Well, one reason that there's this difficulty with Greece and these so-called Eurozone weaker economies is that this is part of a kind of a covert financial warfare between the dollar and the euro as reserve currency. It started when the Chinese started complaining publicly about the flawed economic policy of Washington, running up deficits and endangering the value of Chinese treasury bonds. So now, just when that became public, suddenly there was a Greek crisis, and the Greek crisis was put in place in 2002 before Greece entered the Eurozone by none other than Goldman Sachs, the most powerful bank in America, arguably today, politically well connected in Washington. So it's very clear if you follow the money trail that the Greek crisis was programmed to be detonated at command by Wall Street and the U.S. Treasury, as well as the Federal Reserve, in order to defend the reserve currency role of the U.S. dollar. But I don't see the European economies endangered as the U.S. because one great difference.
This one, I don't understand. This crisis is America considered to protect the dollar reserve. Because maybe what it said, what it means, okay, Greece crisis impact to euro getting weaker, it means US dollar is advantage rather than euro. This is what I believe what his meaning is, okay?
Europe still produces things. Europe still has real industry.
Would you believe that, from going back to the beginning of our interview, would you believe that there are some European countries which benefit from the situation unraveling, say, in Libya right now, like France?
Well, I was just going to say, Sarkozy had a meeting in March when the whole drama in Libya kicked off. He invited leaders of this so-called Transitional National Council to Paris and made them whispered sweet nothings in their ears about having control of the...
Sarkozy had a ploy, conspiracy. to talk with American and European people how to get resource and assets from Libya at that time.
Oil resources of eastern Libya, and poured money, weapons. The CIA and the French intelligence have been pouring arms into these insurgent groups inside Libya. This is an armed insurrection financed by NATO countries in Libya. It's no peaceful Twitter revolution of a bunch of kids who have a dream of American-style democracy or something. This is raw power grab by the French.
What do you predict, or in your opinion, what do you think will happen in Libya now? I mean, the NATO troops will have to pull out at some point, and then what?
Well, will they? I imagine an Iraq-like scenario, or Afghanistan. What do you have in Afghanistan? You have 17 permanent U.S. military bases in Afghanistan, most of them air bases who are not bombing the Taliban. They're preparing for a coming war in perhaps 10 years with China, or maybe with Russia. They've got a military bastion in the heart of Central Asia. That's something that they never had during the Cold War. So I think Libya is destined for a similar treatment.
What role do you think Russia should play in the events which are unraveling right now?
I think Russia, given the history going back more than the Cold War era, Russia can play a very stabilizing role as a counterforce to this highly dangerous strategy of the Greater Middle East Project of NATO and the U.S. in that region. Russia can play a very important role blocking some untoward events from the side of the UN Security Council in Syria. I don't think China would agree, as they did on the Libya case, to a UN sanction action in Syria. But in more ways than that, Russia can play a very constructive role, I think, in the region to try to.
What are you talking about? This is the one. 2011, right? 2011. So now Russia is doing very constructive role in Syria, right?
Counter this destabilization. I would hope they do.
Yeah, counter this destabilization by American and EU countries.
Mr. Engel, thank you very much for your time.
Very, very interesting, right? Please. Okay, this is a very similar video of last week. Last week. Young plane. Okay. Do you agree?
I haven't. I'm not 100% sure if I could catch up the contents. As he's saying in the middle of the video that democratization, starting from Middle East all the way down to North Africa.
Yeah.
Then one of the purpose of promoting this program is taking control over the China, who is becoming more aggressively to take some resources from Africa, as well as Russia. Then, but on the other hand, China seems to be the final thing to the war or this program led by US, which is partially aimed at taking control over the China in the future. Is it correct?
Okay, two objectives is different. First objective is America try to influence Middle East using democratization. Okay, this is first. They try to control Middle East. The reason is not stabilize. Okay, intentionally get in turmoil. This is American strategy. Iran going to get power or Saudi Arabia get power, they are not intending to stabilize in the Middle East. Because the American dollar position or power position, they want to keep it. So this is the first one. Second one is China is, they are putting a lot of money in North Africa, not all over the Africa, since 2005 or 6. And America had the threat of China's invasion into Africa. China is peaceful colonization, right? Peaceful colonization. They had a tremendous amount of money. How much money? 300 billion US dollars already they invested. The Americans cannot catch up with that. So they try to get involvement in, for example, Libya, and get resource advantage. He's talking with France. That Sarkozy is willing to shake hands with America. So country by country, America try to get their own national interest. Trump he just is American first, but not he himself. Beforehand, Obama or Bush everybody looking for America first. They want to get their national interest, not like Japanese. Okay, so this is their way. So this is another reason. Okay. Okay? Do you understand? Kakashi, can you follow?
Yeah, yes,
okay.
Yes, understand.
I'll try now. Huh? But this, glad you are staying with us. So what? Donate? No, sorry. Download time. Okay, go now. Go now. What is this? Must be, oh my god, no, this one. Not keeper, sorry, I don't need it. Okay. Next, I'm moving to next one. African presidential term limit extension. Okay? You can read this Japanese sentence here. Rwanda successful extension of the presidential term limit. Zambia, Malawi, Peru. Out of about 48 new constitutions in Africa enacted in the 1990s, 33 of them provided for term limit for the office of the president. The limit is, for the most part, maximum 2 terms in office. Before that period of transition, only 6 African countries carried the presidential term limit in their constitutions. Interestingly, nearly 30 countries have contemplated the removal of term limit since 1998. In most of these countries, incumbents who had served 2 terms attempted to change the constitution to make themselves eligible for re-election for a 3rd term on the path of lifetime presidency. Some succeeded, for example, Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, and more recently Rwanda's Paul Kagame. Others, like Zambia's Frederick Chiluba and Malawi's Bakiri Muluzi, did not succeed to effect necessary constitutional changes. Usually, the leaders do not extend their terms of office within an election. In most cases, elections are held and incumbents win with ease. 2 issues are of interest. First, the negation of presidential term limits by amendment or interpretation of the Constitution. Secondly, the management of elections with predetermined result. Okay? So this is the explanation. Not here. So you can have a look on Africa. All those is present, what they're doing. And so all this is try to extend their term limit of presidency. This is Mugabe. Okay. President Obama speaks on presidential term limit in Africa 2015. Okay, before he retired. On June 28, 2015, President Barack Obama became the first American president to address the African Union in the institution's 52-year history, a moment lauded for its historical significance, but one that also underscored how far behind the U.S. is in investing in the continent. In his speech, President Obama warned African presidents for attempting to change their country's constitutions so that they could run for a third term or life. Okay, Obama. Just you guys explain in English, but this is additional experience in Japanese. The same. Okay, word. Perilous. Oh, just only this one. Only one. Perilous. His presentation very, easy word and very short. Very short, I think.
I have to also say that Africa's democratic progress is also at risk when leaders refuse to step aside when their terms end. Now, let me be honest with you. I do not understand this. I am in my second term. It has been an extraordinary privilege for me to serve as President of the United States. I cannot imagine a greater honor or a more interesting job. I love my work. But under our Constitution, I cannot run again. I can't run again. I actually think I'm a pretty good president. I think if I ran, I could win. But I can't. So there's a lot that I'd like to do to keep America moving, but the law is the law. And no one person is above the law, not even the president. And I'll be honest with you, I'm looking forward to life after being president. I won't have such a big security detail all the time. It means I can go take a walk. I can spend time with my family. I can find other ways to serve. I can visit Africa more often. The point is, I don't understand why people want to stay so long. Especially when they've got a lot of money. When a leader tries to change the rules in the middle of the game just to stay in office, it risks instability and strife, as we've seen in Burundi. And this is often And this is often just a first step down a perilous path.
Burundi, they just, probably they just, not extend the term of the president.
And sometimes you'll hear a leader say, well, I'm the only person who can hold this nation together. If that's true, then that leader has failed to truly build their nation. You look at Nelson Mandela. Madiba, like George Washington, forged a lasting legacy, not only because of what they did in office, but because they were willing to leave office and transfer power peacefully. And just as the African Union has condemned coups and illegitimate transfers of power,
Coup is a coup d'etat?
the AU's authority and strong voice can also help the people of Africa ensure that their leaders abide by term limits and their constitutions. Nobody should be president for life. And your country's better off if you have new blood and new ideas. I'm still a pretty young man. I'm still a pretty young man, but I know that somebody with new energy and new insights will be good for my country.
At that time, he did know Trump was going to be president, right? When? Not know.
It will be good for yours too in some cases.
Okay. Good speech. Right?
Unno-san,
Hi.
Obama's speech is difficult than Trump's speech.
What? Oh.
Uh,
Really?
because Trump use very simple words,
Really? The
easy
same?
words.
Short sentence, right? Okay, good.
Unno-san.
Ah, you joined. When did you join?
Yes, sorry.
You joined now?
Now, yes, just now.
Okay, just have you seen this video or just you just in the middle of this video?
Yes, in the middle of the
In the
video.
middle. Okay, okay. Just you missed the first one, right? Very interesting one.
Yeah, but no problem.
Okay, no problem. Okay. So you can make a question whatever you like. Then okay. Then I'm moving on the third video, the stream in African countries. How much do term limits matter? Okay, this is changing a limit on term limits of president. Okay? It's a scenario in some countries where presidents seek to rewrite their constitutions to stay in power, mean longer. Okay? In Africa, this year alone, leaders in Rwanda, Burundi, DR Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Congo Republic have challenged term limits for heads of state. How long is too long in office? And what impact do Africa's sit-tight president, しっかり腰を据える have on the country's development? Okay? And the content explanation. Maybe some difficult, some one lady is very difficult to hear. このビデオね、ちょっとね、アフリカのビデオってアフリカの YouTube 特集なんですけど、あちこちから電話してヒアリングしてるケースが多いんですよね。で、今の最近は、4G なんですけど、皆さん。ですけど、よくこう、1年、2年、3年前のビデオはですね、聞き取れないんですよ。で、すごく苦労して聞いてるんですけど、 これも一つの勉強で僕は取り上げたんですけど、聞き取れない、あまり聞き取れないんだけど、いい感じにまとめたんで、まず説明しますね。これ日本語読んでれば、英語が多少、理解しやすいけど、英語そのものは、文章を理解するっていうよりも途切れ途切れなんで、そういう、アフリカの場合、そういうビデオいっぱいあるんですね。で、大変苦労してますけれども、そういうことです。で、ちょっと日本語で説明しますと、ルワンダ、ブルンジ、コンゴ民主共和国、コンゴ共和国は大統領の任期を変えようとしている。こうしたことは民主主義とどのように影響を持たないか議論している。例えば、ウガンダの大統領、ムセベニは1986年、現在はそのポジション、86年、96年、30年以上ですね。UK の調査によれば 92% の人たちが大統領を支持していて、82% の人たちはルワンダの民主主義国家だと言っている。その 78% の人たちはこの時点で生活は、要するに、ムセベニは、30年以上いるからって、世界は彼を悪く言うんですけど、もちろんその選挙でも確かこの国は、ね、不正をして自分がポジション大統領を取るためにいろいろやってたというような気がするんですよ、ムセベニさんね。ですけどね、彼はね、なぜ俺が大統領やるのかって、俺しかいないからやってんだみたいなとこがあるんですね。彼が。ムセベニ。だけど、見方によってはこいつ悪い奴だっていう見方もできるんですよね。他を蹴落としたり、不正をやったり、やってるわけですよね。でも、選挙で不正やって蹴落とすから悪い大統領だっていうと、必ずしもそうじゃないんですよね。だから、またそのうちルワンダやりますけど、非常にそういう意味では、僕も、いっぱい、アフリカの54カ国のうち、半分以上今書いてますけど、すごく難しいんですね、判断が。こいつは悪い奴か、悪い奴じゃないか。しかもですね、これは、このルワンダは英語かどうかちょっと忘れましたけど、フランス語圏も多いんですね。そうするともうね、記事がないんですよ。英語の。で、英語があってもですね、このビデオみたいに非常に聞き取りにくいっていうか、だから本当何なのかみたいな、漢字物みたいなのが多いんですね。OK。それで、この中の議論でね、国民投票で、国民がその大統領でいいって言って言うんだったら別になくてもいいんじゃないかっていう意見があったけど、私もそう思いますね。ムガベは87年か30何年間大統領って、この人の場合はね、奥さんは何つったっけな、ムガベの奥さんね。副大統領をクビにして、で、奥さんを大統領にしようとしたんですよ、ムガベね。で、ムガベ自身はもう、コラプションって汚職の塊みたいで。確か彼女もね、ものすごく金遣い荒い人で。で、わざわざムガベが軍隊をコンゴにまで出してですね、ダイヤモンド鉱山を守った。それは何かと彼女が出資してるからですね。だから要するにね、ムガベ自身がもうね、93にもなってもうね、やっぱりね、もうダメなんですよね。多分認知症だと思うんですけど、奥さんの言いなりになってるんですね。だからむちゃくちゃやったからやっぱり、ただ彼は国を作ったですからね。ジンバブエをね。白人を、スミスさんっていうね、白人を、追い出したりしないけど、うまい具合に黒人の国にしたんですよね。だから、アフリカの国はジンバブエみたいになりたいってみんな思ってたから、ムガベさんってやっぱり神さんみたいな人だったんですね。でもいくらなんでもやっぱり汚職がひどいし、やっぱりネポティズムって言うんですけどね、縁故主義なんで、それはひどすぎたんで、今回。あと、ブルンジのピエール・ウンクルンジーザ。ピエール・ブルンジーもやった。これ、ウンクルンジーザはどうだったかなちょっと忘れました。若い人たち何件良いのかもうまく当時して。これはだから、うまく当時してんだったらいいんじゃないかと、ブルンジーと忘れました。それをしていいんじゃないかという意見がありますよね。で、オンライン調査で大統領人気が必要かという質問したら、88% 必要だと。やっぱり人気がいるよって言って。そうは言っても一般大衆は地域のリーダーが誰かという関心はあるけども、大統領が誰かと問うことになれば、関わりないのであまり関心がないっていう。そうですよね。アフリカなんかって国が広いから、 ローカルのリーダーの選挙は関心あるけどね、やっぱり大統領ってあんまり直接関心がないというかもしれませんね。政府に対しての不満が一体何かということの方が、これはもう政府に対しての不満が一体何か、これの方が重要ですね。大統領が長く務めるか務めないかっていう。よくね、今回はアフリカいっぱいビデオの中で大統領の人気がなんだかんだ議論してますけど、大統領人気ばっか議論してて、何をしてるのかってことを議論してないケースが結構多いんですね。で、街が綺麗だとか、Wi-Fi がちゃんとしてるかとか、治安が大丈夫か、女性が安全に住めるか、そういうことが本当は課題なんですよね、っていうことを、この中で意見、オピニオンが言ってますね。何期するかどうかじゃなくて、リーダーがきちんと当時しているかというのが問題だというね。OK？ で、あとね、相続説明で、ルワンダレフェレンダム。ルワンダについては、どこで書いてあるね。ムセベニね。ルワンダレフェレンダム。2017年、に、ポール・カガメ、任期満了に伴う大統領選が実施された。2000年が大統領。カガメってね、いい人なんですよ。だから彼がね、終身の、長期政権に不満はね、ないですよね。ただこの国ってね、1994年にルワンダの悲劇って言って、大虐殺があったんですね。わずか100日間で80万人が、土族と仏族って言ってね、仏族がね、土族をね、80万人、わずか100日間で殺しちゃったんですよね。ルワンダの悲劇ですね。虐殺って有名ですけどね。で、その時の、土族の、司令官がカガメだったんですね。で、カガメがその戦いで100日後に勝って、その後ずっと大統領だったんですね。で、10年の全選挙で 93%。15年任期期限の憲法改正に伴う国民投票も、任期期限を伸ばすね。98% 賛成。続投が容認されて、最長で34年までの政権維持が可能となって、大決戦の意図と定年主義に乏しい諸国に政治的安定と経済発展をもたらしたカガメ。で、民族融和を掲げる一方で反対者への弾圧。反対者への弾圧なんですよ。これよくあるんですね。強権的な治安体制。よくあるんですよ。で、なぜかというとね、俺が国を治めてるから国が今ね、政治が安定してる。経済発展してる。そういう、ムセベニもそうですけど、だから選挙を不正したりですね、弾圧したりするんですよ。でそれが悪いかっていうと、僕はこういうことを読んでて分かったんですけど、必ずしも悪くないですね。それを、ウェスターナーっていうか、西側諸国の人は、こいつはダメだ、あいつは悪いって言いますけど、必ずしもそうじゃないですね。それを、どう冷静に判断するか。何度か説明してるかと、このビデオ見て分かりますけど、難しいんですよ、聞き取りにくくて。なんていうかな、半分ぐらい分かんない、聞き取れないんだけど、それで想像して書いてますからね。無我め。これなんでこんな説明してるかっていうと、こういう説明文章を読んでないと、本文読んでも分かんない。飛び飛びになってるからね。ムガベ、36年の手将棋独裁するジンバブエのロバート・ムガベね、今93ですね。で、人員を追い込もう。それはそうですよね。コラプションとか、奥さん大事にしてね、2016年大統領選出動。与党、ジンバブエ、アフリカ、民族同盟愛国戦線。これ、ザヌ PF っていうのかザヌ PF の党大会で承認された。ジンバブエ2013年に制定され、新興最長で2期10年ですね。ただ、1924年前ですね。これすごいですよ、これね、93歳でね、大統領ですからね、ステージに立って演説するんですよね。すごいですよね、議会でも。ね。これは、だから、1981年初代に大統領に就任して、これだから白人からね、貸し取ったんですよね。サブサハラ有数の工業生産を誇り、白人農業に対する農業生産が高かった。だけど、白人から黒人が転換したのと、92年、81年、5年後に、土地収容法で白人を追い出したんですよね。でそうするとね、これ何が起こったかというと、黒人移住させると、白人の農場がね、ダメになっちゃったんですよね。農地荒廃するって書いてるでしょ。農業生産が極端に落ちたんですよね。だから、アフリカから彼がもう崇拝されたんだけど、でも 白人を追い出しちゃうと、結局回らないっていうね。まあ、黒人悪いわけじゃないけど、スキルないし、教育受けてないから農業でもなんでも。だから今、アフリカはどこの国もですね、人材育成、エデュケーション、トレーニング、ね、それからインフラストラクチャー。それから、government planning、long range planning。この3つが絶対必要なんですね。スキルがないんですよ。だから、技術持ってっても、例えば 4G、今アフリカ全部 4G 入れちゃったり入れようとしてますけど、何が問題かっていうと、4G をうまく活用するトレーニング、トレーナーがいないんですね。じゃあそれでもって彼らはできるかっていうと、まあもちろんファーマーが携帯電話を使って自分の農産物をどうやって売るかみたいなことはできてもですね、それをベストのソリューションを探すなんてことはスキルない。でさらに政権内で汚職が起こして、言論統制を反する。これね、ムガメはね、経済は一生懸命やったんだけど、政治は何もしなかったんですね。だから、国際社会、不安が高まってね、ものすごいインフレだってね、2億3000万%って言うから、もう完全にもうアウトですね。で今現在、アメリカドルが流出してるってね。そういうことですね。こう最近の話ですよ。あと、ブルンディはちょっと書いてあったね。ブルンディはね、今回アフリカで僕取り上げたかどうかわかんないけど、ウンクルンジザっていうブルンディの政治家、2005年から大統領。これ長いですね。これ6候補が全員選挙をボイコットして彼再選された。2010年。で、15年3期連続の大統領職を目指す宣言したことにより、抗議デモが発生していると。で、野党がボイコットする中で行われた大統領選挙に当選し、3期目に入った。反大統領派は参戦を禁止する憲法に違反するとして、禁止してね、コンスティューション。でも彼また選挙に当選した。3期ね。で、アメリカ合衆国のジョン・ケリー国務長官は、選挙を非民主的と批判した。だから、ここでのポイントはですね、ブルンジは、two-term president は、two-term ね、そう、この、ウンクルンジーザーは、参戦しちゃったんですね。憲法違反だっていう、そういうことですね。で、これはすごく苦労しましたけど、単語を読んでますね。マーシャル。時々使いますね。ティンカーもあんまり出ないね。ティンカー、時々ね。クリーピー。これも時々ね。バックトゥバックウィンズ。これもあんまり出ない。キガリはルワンダの首都ね。キガリ。レグレス。これもあんまり使えない。coming on the tail end. これはあんまり出てこない。tongue in check. これもあんまり使わない。使わないの多いですね。impose a limit on. これ impose a limit。impose もしょっちゅう出ますね。custody, impose. bloodshed. これもしょっちゅう出ますね。obsess. これもしょっちゅう出ますね。obsess. swagger.どうですかね。あんまり使わないけど、まあ、スワが時々ね。次は、I was becoming weary of the monotonous life. これは weary ですね、きっと。weary だよね。figurehead。これは時々出ます。figurehead。interact。これしょっちゅう出ますね。lousy。これもしょっちゅう出ますね。lousy。ひどいよ、粗末ね。lousy ね。placeholder。プレソーラ。あんまり出ないけど使います。プレソーラ。disingenuous。ingenious で出ますけど、disingenuous よりも ingenious はしょっちゅう出ますね。Okay, so this is all words. So keep in mind. Then I'm going to difficult video. Good exercise. Okay, not difficult English. Difficult video to listen. Okay, just have a look.
ホームページ自分で作ってみませんか？ Wix なら素敵なホームページを簡単に作成できます。
ちょっと待って、
個人ビジネスからアーティスト。
余計なのいっぱい立ち上がってるんですよね。Okay, so...
まで豊富なテンプレートを
36 minutes, oh my god.
Hi, I'm Funny OK, and you're...
Oh, she is very famous lady. Okay, she's very famous. She's very famous. And this one is... The Stream is a famous TV in Africa. Okay. By the way, I like to start this video like this from this April, right? And this is 36 minutes, but my network, news network, 5 to 7 minutes. But this is very long. But okay, let's have a look.
Today, how much do presidential term limits matter if you're a leader in Africa? We'll look at the debate over how long presidents should stay in office.
She's okay, okay? No problem.
So we have a vibrant community online in Africa, also watching TV. Joining this conversation, marshalling the conversation is Omabada. What's going on?
It really is quite interesting, given how obvious it is to some people that term limits are an important part of democracy, and for others it's just so obvious that it's not. So we have Boris over here who says without presidential term limits, there is no window to allow fresh air of democracy in.
So this guy is always reading Twitter or Facebook, whatever. This is Twitter, right? And he explained the ordinary people's opinion. Then later, the guest speaker will come in on this video. So those people are difficult to listen, but she and he is no problem. Okay.
And on the other hand, you have Amino over here who says, I don't believe in term limits. What I believe in is good leadership. So, is good leadership good enough? Let us know using the hashtag HAStream.
Hi there, I'm Elliot Ross. I'm the senior editor at Africa is a Country, and I'm in the stream.
Changing the limits on term limits, it's a scenario in some countries where presidents are trying to rewrite their constitutions to stay in power. More than 30 states around Africa limit the number of times a president can serve, but just this year, Rwanda, Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Republic of Congo have questioned.
This is Republic of Congo. Oh no, this is Republic of Congo. This is Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo.
In term limits for heads of state. In some cases, the prospect of a third-term president has been a source of protest and violence. Today, we want to examine attitudes towards term limits and discuss what impact they have on democracies. With us to talk about this via Skype in Harare, Zimbabwe, Nigel Mugamu. He is the founder and CEO of 263 Chat, an online discussion forum. Good to have you here, Nigel. Kampala, Uganda, Patience Akumu is a lawyer and writer. Hi, Patience.
This one, you have a look. I can see her well, right? Also, the communication network is terrible. I can see her. Okay, her voice is also very vague.
Also in Kampala, hello there, Simon Gaheru. He is a media analyst and former Ugandan government spokesperson. And in Kigali, Rwanda, Sare Nayombia. He is an associate editor with Rwanda's English language newspaper, The New Times. Good to have you here, everybody. Simon, your president is often on a list of the longest serving presidents in the whole world. Is that a bad thing? Why should it be such a big deal? There are lots of democracies around the world where there are no term limits. The UK, France, Australia. So what?
Yeah, so you're quite right. There are very many countries out there that don't have term limits. And The problem with most of the people who refer to our president, many of the African presidents, and talk about how long they've been in power, is they seem to focus all power in the office of the president, or in the person of the president, which is totally wrong. And you ran a comment just a few minutes ago of somebody talking about it should be about good leadership rather than term limits. Because leadership...
Well, she said good leadership rather than term limits.
Cuts across a much wider split than just the president.
Sure. Let me just go to Patience. Patience, you're also in Uganda. So your president, I've met him, he's very charming, charismatic.
Uganda, Museveni, okay? Oh, this is Museveni.
Person. He's been around for a really long time. Is that a problem for you?
Yes, because...
Okay, she's a lawyer.
We're talking about it simply theoretical, that it's possible to have a president who's long-standing, but who's a good leader, but Museveni and other presidents in Africa who have tinkered with constitutions.
Tinker.
Doing it because they are not good leaders and the people do.
Creepy dance.
Do not find them.
Okay, this is trope is coming here, but this is not accurate because the voice is not clearly.
So they are finding ways to consolidate themselves into power, and they are doing everything. If they were good leaders, we wouldn't actually be having this conversation. The fact of this conversation alone should tell people like Simon that there is a real problem, and there is almost no such thing as good leadership without some limits, at least not in Africa. That's not what the reality tells us.
So we have people in our online community who are echoing Simon's point of view. We have Mesai over here who says, I don't get the need for term limits. What matters most is serving the interest of citizens. And then we have Marianne over here who says, why not? If it's the wish of voters to have this president go on, then it's 100% okay. Nigel, in that sense, can you imagine a scenario in which term limits could actually be undemocratic because they're preventing the people from wanting their president to continue moving forward with the terms?
I'll tell you my view. 60-70% of Africa is population are youth. I'm all.
Oh, just by the way, he said 60% population is young people. He said, actually, Africa average year is last year 24 years old average. Oh, now this year 25 years old average. Very young. 25 years old. No? More younger. I think, no? 23 or 24, 25. Anyway, young.
For term limits, how else are we going to get the young people involved in the democratic process? How else are we going to get a young person involved in being a leader? So let's have term limits. I always refer back to the constitution of that country to say, what does the constitution say? Our constitution, for example, has term limits. It never used to before, but we changed our constitution in May 2013. And so there are term limits in that constitution. So I'm all for change.
Let me just bring in Sunny. Sunny, Rwanda has a pretty controversial vote coming up. It's a referendum about whether your president should be able to run for a third term. So he was elected first in 2000. He's had 2 back-to-back terms. So that's 14 years.
Yeah, I told you, Mr. Ben, right? Do you remember? This is Rwanda, Mr. Ben. This one? Oh, Rwanda. Sorry, Rwanda is not Mr. Ben. Kagame. Okay. Mr. Ben is Uganda. Rwanda is Kagame. He's extended his term, but it doesn't matter. Okay, and also she said back-to-back wins. Okay.
Years. Do you see any issue with successful?
Not 14 years. I think how many years?
That's 14 years.
40 years. 40. Kagame is Mugabe. Kagame. It doesn't write down here. 1994 2004 20 maybe 25 years. since 1994. Huh? Since 2000. So this is right. She said 14 years. Okay.
Yes. Do you
Okay, just this video is prepared on the day 2015. Okay, this is okay. 14 years. She's right.
see an issue with a successful president continuing on and on and on?
Well, first of all, I want to greet you and say that Kigali is great. I have a problem with the way you started that question by calling it a controversial election or referendum.
Yeah. Have a look here at my laptop. Sonny, have a look at my laptop. I was actually quoting this. I should have just shown it to you, first of all. Rwandans head to polls in controversial referendum. So I was actually looking at this as I was talking to you.
Okay, but here's I challenge you.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's
okay. Rwanda referendum. I just explained Rwanda referendum here. Okay, this year or last year. Okay, August. Right. I just explained that. Okay, he's talking about this issue.
That's from The Guardian, right?
Let me just
so that's The Guardian.
No, Deutsche Welle.
So the question that I must ask, okay, well, it's not anything local. This election is only controversial to those who are looking at it from the outside.
Yeah.
Here,
from the inside.
From the inside, it's not controversial at all. I mean, we had above 3 million.
He said from inside. Okay, inside this country, not controversial.
People petitioning Parliament, asking for amendment of the Constitution to remove term limits or to change them. So I'm not sure how you could call it controversial.
So, if the referendum passes, then your president can run for a third term of 7 years, and then another 2 terms of 5 years, and there will be.
What he said, not controversial, means within Rwanda, they supported Kagame to get third term.
Term limits for 5 years rather than 7 years. We add all of that up, it could be 31 years in power. That's not from the inside. Is that what Rwandans are hoping for?
Well, there's interesting poll that came out recently by iPost Mori, which is a market research company in the UK. And these are just some of the facts. These are the things that they found out when they interviewed people. They found out that 92% of all respondents would vote for Paul Kagame if elections were held today. 82% of all respondents say that Rwanda is a full democracy, and 78% believe that are optimistic that their lives will be better in a year. So I'm pretty sure that
this I just explained before for you, right?
Such high numbers show just how in touch people are.
But let me ask you this. I mean, we have some people who are echoing that sentiment. We have Hope here online who says the same recipe doesn't work for everybody. In Rwanda's case, why stop a good thing while it's working just for change's sake? But on the other hand, we have Adam here who says, in Kigali, fish aren't free to jump and dare answer you. Big brother Kagame is watching. Could that be a potential explanation for why it isn't controversial internally? It's because people who oppose it are afraid to speak up about it.
Again, I just quoted a survey made by an independent.
I want to jump in on one point here.
Patience. I hear you too. Patience, I'll bring you in.
Do the people in Rwanda want Kagame to stay on for another 31 years? Possibly not, but they do want the option of him staying on for maybe another 5 or 6 or 7.
Yeah.
They should have the right to keep him for as long as they want to keep him and make changes when they want to, without there being a certain limit that is fixed according to aspirations or ideas that they probably don't agree with.
Patience?
Or that they probably don't feel are necessary at this point in time.
Simon, in 2003,
you to know that that is usually how it starts. Even Museveni, even Mugabe were once the Ghani.
Museveni, he's talking about Museveni. She's talking about Museveni. Museveni is, Uganda. Okay, and just this one, he's just a former New York Times guy talking about Rwanda, about Museveni, 1986, 1986. He just criticized something, but he is come from Uganda. This is Museveni.
Democracy of the West, you know, the figures were glowing and
we're not
the
talking about
country
the
was
West.
apparently developing. But when a leader overstays,
we're not talking about the
going
West.
to go back. There is going to be regret by the mere fact that you are in power and they are not yet to say it yourself. He should do what he wants. Leaders are not supposed to do what they want. They're supposed to abide by laws. And if they are tinkering with the laws,
but Patience, you've got to agree that laws are changed. Actually, in the case of Uganda, for instance, we had a referendum.
Patience, take a pause so I can hear Simon. Patience and Simon, stop. Patience and Simon, both stop talking for a second so I can hear you both. Patience, let Simon just respond to you. Go ahead, Simon. Simon, go ahead.
Sorry, me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, Patience talked about the rule of law. And I was pointing out that in the case of Uganda, for instance, we followed the law. We changed the constitution, going by a referendum. Same type of referendum that was held in countries in Europe just a couple of years ago. That goes to the people and asks them, what do you want? And the majority of the people made a choice. And that choice is what everybody is abiding by. And democracy is not just about this one item called presidential term limits. No.
Yeah.
The president is only one leader in a country. There are thousands of other leaders in this country, at least I can speak about Uganda. And each of those leaders has a responsibility of leadership. Each of them has a certain role that they must play. And even the voters themselves have a role and responsibility to check the leaders, to drop them if they're not doing what they're doing, what they're supposed to be doing, and to select the ones that they feel are going to be doing a better job. With or without any of these artificial tenets or ideas that may exist from,
Nigel?
where you come from.
Nigel, what do Zimbabweans feel about, and how do they feel about President Mugabe? He's been in power since the 1980s.
Could you please repeat that again?
Yeah, President Mugabe. How do Zimbabweans feel about President Mugabe? If you could get a sense of what was happening in Zimbabwe regarding your president, how popular is he?
How do they feel about President Mugabe in Zimbabwe?
Yeah. In power since 1987.
No, 1980. So yeah, okay.
Even longer than I thought.
1987. Yes. Look, it's obviously right now. If I'm talking about right now, people are waiting to see what happens with the succession debate. I think people have generally accepted the fact that he's coming to the tail end of his, and now the issue, the focus is more on succession. So who's going to be the next president? I think people outside the country make a bigger deal about him being the president for 35 years. I think us here in Zimbabwe were more interested in, so who is going to be the next president?
So when he was at an African Union meeting in June in South Africa, President Mugabe actually attacked another president, the one in Burundi, Pierre Nkurunziza, for staying in power too long. I didn't know whether he was being tongue-in-cheek or being serious. Have a listen to this and then maybe you can make up your own mind.
But when we have served 2 terms, we have not done much. And 2 terms was like 2 weeks. So we want to go more. So you want another term and you must find an excuse. The first term I served, no, it was not a real term. But you were there for 5 years. Oh no, it was Parliament which chose me. I should have been chosen by the people, so that one does not count. And the others say it counts.
President Mugabe being very witty there, but also making very pointed remarks about what's happening in Burundi. Even worse situation in Burundi right now, because Pierre Nkurunziza decided that he was going to run for a third term. What are you saying about this?
That's right. And people are complaining about how bloody the situation is. So you have somebody named I Am Burundi tweeting in, saying some are killing their people and will do anything to keep themselves in power here in reference to Burundi. Sonny, in cases where mass violence breaks out over something like that, would you say that cases that extreme might warrant saying that we should actually impose term limits and stick to them to avoid bloodshed?
Well, this is what I personally believe. I believe that the issue of governance in Africa is not an issue of term limits or removing term limits. I doubt...
Okay, he is very good of speaking, very good opinion. Issue is not term of limit. The issue is not removing term limits.
Whether the people in Burundi are out in the streets or are fighting simply because of term limits or the removal of. I'm sure that there are other issues.
But how can you say that? Because the actual protests and the violence actually started exactly when their president said, I'm actually running for a third term. The first term didn't count. I'm going to go for another term.
Femi, that's also do believe we have violence in many other parts of this continent, in countries that have term limits in place. We've had violence in Uganda during times when we did have term limits.
Oh, absolutely. To Sonny's point, he said, I doubt if the people in Burundi were out in the streets because of term limits. I'm just going to say, in this occasion,
they were out in the streets.
Because they were out in the Burundi 10 years ago, 15 years ago, was not because of term limits, and there was conflict there at that time as well. And we've really got to go deeper than this issue called presidential term limits. We really.
Do you want to tell people in Burundi that? Do you want to tell people in Burundi that, Simon? Do you want to tell people in Burundi that?
We also need to stop assessing these African countries as if they are monarchies. You know, the whole concept of term limits appears to be monarchical to me, whereas
he's talking about monarchies, kunshu riken.
Instead, we need to be looking, as I keep saying, at leadership on the whole. Leadership and governance, as Sonny calls it, rather than just presidential term limits. Not everything can be around the person of the president. Okay, you can have presidents rotating like musical chairs, and
Simon, I'd like us to talk about the issue of like countries like in Mali. Mali had term limits for decades, but how is Mali now?
And we could talk about some of the more...
Okay, Mali is, I didn't explain about Mali on this Japanese explanation. Mali is worst political situation. Still now is extremists invading that country. The country itself is very unstable. It doesn't work. Okay.
Advanced economies in Europe that don't have term limits and are doing extremely well without them. A couple of them are even monarchies themselves. So focusing on presidential term limits as this major governance issue, I don't think it.
He said presidential term limit as the major governance issue. And he said...
The right thing. I think on this continent, we are supposed to be looking at what the elite are doing. What constitutes leadership? You know, how do we develop these continents? Who are the people that we call leaders? Who are the lead academics that think up solutions? Who are the lead implementers that put those solutions into place? And what do the people do about changing their leaders, bringing their leaders to account, even without these term limits? Because as you can see, you can change the constitution without any problem, whether you're in Uganda or in the United States, and then have a president change. Or you could even have presidents, like I said, changing like musical chairs, and things getting worse every single day. So term limits, I don't think are on positive gains for this country. No.
You said the negative for the making time limit or discussion kind of sort of things.
We need to be going much deeper than just presidential term limits. We need to be looking at a lot more than just the position of president of the country.
But Simon, it's very hard to look beyond limits that we cannot in after sense start to have conversations about leadership, about who is a good leader, because these people do not just remove some about any other leader. It comes with institutionalized poverty. It comes with tribalism. It comes with misallocation of resources and corruption. And when the situation is this way, you cannot start to have the deep conversations of governance, because in many ways African countries have not even taken the first step. The reality for other European countries, like you say, that seem to be developing without some limits, is because they've had a chance to develop a system of governance over time, historically, that unfortunately because of colonialism and other factors, we in Africa have not been able to. But where we are right now, all the indicators show that when you take away some limits, there is bloodshed. No matter how long it takes, no matter how perfect it may seem, like in Rwanda now that it's developing, the fact that this is the kind of development that is being held by a threat.
Patience, take a pause for a moment. I'm going to play this. Yes.
Hold on, just listen again.
We need to be going much deeper than just presidential campaign. We need to be looking at a lot more than just the position of president of the country.
Well, African people's characteristics is speak too fast.
Simon, it's very hard to look beyond limits when we cannot in after things start to have conversations about leadership, about who is a good leader, because these people do not just remove some limits. They're acting like they remove some limits are an abstract thing. No, some limits have a system of ingraining the censorship, of convincing the populace that there is only one leader, so that they're not speaking about any other leader. It comes with institutionalized poverty. It comes with tribalism. It comes with misallocation of resources and corruption. And when the situation is this way, you cannot start to have the deep conversations of governance, because in many ways African countries have not even taken the first step. The reality for other European countries, like you say, that seem to be developing without some limits, is because they've had a chance to develop a system of governance over time, historically, that unfortunately because of colonialism and other factors, we in Africa have not been able to. But where we are right now, all the indicators show that when you take away some limits, there is bloodshed. No matter how long it takes, no matter how perfect it may seem, like in Rwanda now that it's developing, the fact that this is the kind of development that is being held by a threat.
Patience, take a pause for a moment. I'm going to play this. Guess, take a pause for a moment. Patience, take a pause for a moment. I just want to play this.
Okay. Very difficult to understand what he said, but she is trying to say how long president's term is as the current president staying there or not. And she wanted to say the content of president, what he's doing, or he's trying to targeting for how to improve this government, and instead of term of the president. Maybe he said like that, right? Somebody to listen to the content what he said. That's very difficult to understand, but maybe she said like that.
This is again at the African Union. A lot of action happenings at the African Union. This is President Obama at the African Union. I'm not too sure that any other head of state could have come to Addis and said this other than this particular president. Have a listen to what he has to say here.
When a leader tries to change the
rules
in the middle of the game just to stay in office, it risks instability and strife, as we've seen in Burundi. And this is often just a first step down a perilous path. And sometimes you'll hear a leader say, well, I'm the only person who can hold this nation together. If that's true, then that leader has failed to truly build their nation.
Did you see his face there, Nigel? He was really serious. There was a little swagger going on, but he was like, seriously, guys, you need to get this together. What do you make of that? Outsiders,
and remember that everybody just pushed back and said, come on, there's no way you would have made that speech in Russia. Here you're talking to us what you think is a council of kings. Guys, we can't keep focusing on this position of president. Many people come onto this continent, into these countries, and do business, set up, their dreams and they never ever deal with the president. They're dealing with you and me. They're dealing with technocrats. They're dealing with people who are actually running the show, regardless of who the president is. And when they get frustrated, they're frustrated by those very other people. We need to be going deeper than simply the position of president. It is good to have a president who's going to keep stability, for instance, who's going to continue development, yes, but to talk about the need to switch presidents in order to create development.
Right, Simon, you made that point really well and very thoroughly. Let me just move on. Omar, go ahead.
So we have people who are echoing President Obama's points. We have David over here who says, I see Mugabe's argument about the will of the people, but the office can become a throne for a particular person. And then we have Gatwiri over here who says, good leadership is not about individuals, but systems. If a country needs an individual, then there is a problem. Nigel, why do you think there is such an attachment to individuals?
Yeah, I was just about to say, I'm glad you've asked me that question. So, like I said, I'm all about term limits. I truly believe in them, but I believe in them for the reason that I stated before. Look, let's get more young people involved. Okay. But to answer your question about personalities and so forth, look, the common man on the streets is interested in bread and butter issues. Okay. I don't think they're interested in term limits. I think what they're interested in is good governance, and what they're interested, along with good governance, is also strong institutions. So I think I agree with what Simon's saying. I think we spend a lot of time focusing on.
Nigel, sorry, I know you're just about to say something really great, and we'll pick up with you in just a moment. Patience, but you are determined.
But he's saying a very good point. Not term. They're all the same. Many the other lady the same opinion. Not term. What he's doing.
That this idea about a leader that stays and stays and stays is problematic. But let me just give you a couple of places. Belgium, Denmark, Turkey, Finland, Ireland, Italy. Their prime ministers could stay in power for as long as they continue to be voted in. You wouldn't say that these countries had an issue with democracy, would you?
Oh, well,
allow Patience to ask this.
Okay, yeah.
Patience.
Yes, that's because the countries that you've mentioned actually have a system of elections. That's why. So you find that in Africa the problem is twofold. You've removed some limits, and then the elections are not critical.
Okay.
You have incumbents who use state coffers, who have free access to state coffers. In Uganda, the incumbents started campaigning 2 years ago, and the opposition started campaigning 3 months ago. The incumbent travels by helicopter. The opposition is traveling on terrible roads when they are caught in the rain, and it's just not a level playing field.
Sure.
So what happens is the opposition practically has no chance, or as the president, nobody does. Nobody ever assists the incumbent, in such a situation.
Okay, Patience, I'm just going to check back in.
Somebody else has a chance to keep their...
Patience, I'm just going to check back in with Sunny, because this is an interesting milestone for Rwanda, Sunny, in terms of extending President Kagame's time as a president. Where do you think Rwanda will go?
Well, I'll first start with some of the things that Patience said.
We have 1 minute, so if you do that, we won't find out your thoughts about Rwanda, and I'd really like to hear about those.
Really, really fast.
Yeah.
First of all, Patience talks about in Africa and Africa. Africa is not a country. You can talk about
Yes,
Rwanda,
she knows that. She knows that. Sunny, where do you think Rwanda will go? And then I'm wrapping up the show. Where do you think Rwanda will go?
I think Rwanda is going to do great. I mean, just looking at the development rates that we're going at, maybe 7% a year.
Sunny and Simon
I'm very
and Patience and Nigel, this conversation is much bigger than our main show. This is why we have a post-show. Stream.outofzero.
His English is very good, but he is he's not opinion leader. She is talking about very good, but just very difficult to hear from her. Oh my God.
Extending the
so she irritating, right?
limit of
like a kind of video, so many videos like this
show, but it's okay. It's democratic. Thanks for watching, everybody.
And also African people speak very fast.
See you online.
And also local accents. One more. Al Jazeera is very good, news TV.
Hi, welcome back. This is the Streams Online Post Show. We're talking about African attitudes toward presidential term limits. I thought what was interesting was Nigel and Simon. You basically agree governance is more important than maybe who the
She said governance is more important than term.
figurehead is up there. But there are still so many heads of state who are in place for a very long time. Would you say that all of those countries are doing really well? Because that's the key, isn't it? It's like, how well are the countries doing?
No, you're right. I mean, I think what happens is if a country's doing well, okay, and I found out the other day that Angela Merkel.
Okay, this is a different person, right?
Going to a fourth term in 2017 or something like that.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I was like, I couldn't believe it. But Germany is a strong country economically, right? I think it's quite easy to simply say, okay, this country's not doing well, so therefore it's a term limit. There's a lot of things that take place. If we're talking about corruption and saying, okay, this country there's corruption, let's talk about the corruptor, okay? Because usually the corruptor is sitting in the West somewhere, right? How come we never focus on the corruptor? So if we're going to tell the story, let's tell it in its fullness, and let's do it properly, right? So yes, term limits are an issue. Yes, they need to be addressed. Like I said, I'm all for them. But I think when a country's not doing well, it's much bigger than just term limits.
Omar.
So we did something interesting. We put out an online poll to our online community asking them whether they think presidential term limits are necessary. So it's not a scientific poll, but nonetheless you can see on my screen here that it's a landslide. 88% say yes, presidential term limits are necessary. Simon, a lot of our community online actually was tweeting in from the continent, from Africa. Why do you think this is so popular? I mean, you've laid the case against why it might not be necessary, but why do you think so many people think it is necessary?
No. Not only why it might not be necessary. Term limits might be necessary for some countries, and not necessary for others. That's a right that's going to be given to the people within those different countries. However,
Simon, they don't always have the choice. Simon, they don't always have the choice, though. What's the choice? What's the option?
No. You can't say they don't always have the choice. They do have the choice. In Uganda, we have the choice. In Rwanda, they're going to exercise their choice this weekend. Okay, and I'm not going to speak for Mali or any other country until they've held their election. But we've had the choice. We have the choice, and the whole point is to create that choice without saying, with or without the choice, with or without the system, you've got to have term limits. You can't throw a blanket over the country. But besides that, when we do a poll of this nature, who are we listening to? Who has the larger share of voice? Are we listening to the people, or are we listening to the people who have internet access? Are we listening to the people who live in the cities and can afford to make use of that internet access? Yeah. We've got to really begin questioning who we are talking to on this question about, who we are representing. When I hold a referendum in my country and go out to 15 million people, then what those 15 million people say should hold. That is democracy.
Do you know what, Simon, I should point out, remind people.
A number.
But you were a Ugandan government spokesman, so why would you say anything to the contrary? I mean,
because I'm also.
No, but you know what?
The UK held a referendum just last year about Scotland, right?
Yeah.
They didn't do an opinion poll. They held a referendum, and that's what their law states. So, if another country chooses to do the same, shouldn't we follow that right? Rather than doing online polls? Yes, doing an online poll kind of gives you an indication. But then, the people that you're polling, you've got to take into account. If you go out to a guy on the street, okay, and ask him, what do you want? He's not going to tell you anything about what the president does. That's not what his daily struggle is. His struggle has nothing to do with who the president is. His struggle is getting food. His struggle is getting his kids into school. His struggle is stopping someone from dropping bombs into his house.
She's very good opinion she's talking about. Okay, need to consider for infrastructure like a school or some sort of things instead of bomb, right?
Okay, we have certain realities that people aspire to, and that's what we need to be focusing on when we talk about.
Okay, that's what we need to focusing on.
Governance and leadership.
Sure.
For most of the
government leadership,
people in these countries in Africa, they don't interact with the president. They interact with their local council leadership. That's where leadership is. That's how they get to the president. But this immediacy is what we need to be looking at when we talk about leadership. If we talked about term limits and said we need term limits for the entire band of leadership, then I think the discussion will be much more interesting. But we always talk about term limits for one position up there. Forget about who's going to be the local council 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chairperson. The people who actually control the resources, the people who actually have a direct impact.
All right, Simon,
on the
take a break for a moment. I just want to bring Omar back into the conversation. Omar, go ahead.
So Simon was talking about how the continent is very diverse and each country should have basically make its own rules. But we have people here who disagree online. We have Abel over here who says the African Union is failing to use its voice against those who want to stay for a long time for many, many reasons. And then we have James who says you're absolutely right. That's something the African Union should consider for the future, is to set term limits. Patience, given the diversity of the continent, would you be in favor of a blanket measure like that forces term limits on the entire continent?
Look, give me one example.
That one is for Patience.
Nigel, hold tight for a moment. Let's just hear what Patience has to say. Personally, I think it's ridiculous. You can't have a term limit for an entire continent. It's ridiculous. But Patience, what do you think?
I think the entire continent needs drastic measures, because clearly what we are using now, the mediocrity, the lackluster way with which the African Union is handling issues is not working. So it would be very, very good if we had some units in the continent, if every president would say that I will give 2 terms or maybe 3 terms, and then we would have people speaking at the same level. Because the reason why issues like Burundi are continuing, the reason why some people can't step in is because the presidents are not at the same level. They fear to shoot themselves in the foot. There is so much disparity between countries, and there isn't a single voice. And this means that, important issues are just brought under the carpet because the AU doesn't speak with one voice. The AU is ambiguous, and the AU falters at every time.
Nigel, what were you trying to say? Go ahead.
Look, I can't remember the last time the AU did something that I was like, look, you know what, I support that, okay? Where was the AU when Burundi was on fire, okay? So I don't think, if the AU came, if I was the president of Zimbabwe, and the AU came to us and said, listen, so we're going to impose term limits on you as a country, I'll tell them where to go. Because where were they? Where are they? And how significant is the AU on the African continent? And I'm sure Simon has an opinion on this, right? I think each country, and remember there's 54 countries here, each country has its own government, has its own political system. I'm not from Rwanda, so I don't know what's happening there. I've been to Rwanda before, and that's why when you ask me about, my word association, development, when I went to Kigali, I saw development, right? But I think it's important to let countries make their own decisions. I think what Simon was saying, as I said earlier on about the common man on the street, they're not as worried about things like term limits and so forth, like, people like us who have internet and so forth, right? I think what they're concerned about is bread and butter issues. And a lot of people haven't made the distinction between why it's tough for them and governance issues. And I think there's a wider conversation here, not just about term limits, but also just about, the level of corruption, the ease of doing business in this country. I mean, there's a plethora of issues that I think we need to, discuss when we're talking about term limits. Good point.
Sure. And we have done over the years, not just here on the stream, but on Al Jazeera as well. Sonny, I mean, the issue with Rwanda is that your president has done such a phenomenal job. Rwanda is doing so well in terms of gender parity, in terms of Wi-Fi in Kigali, in terms of women in power. The list goes on and on and on and on and on and on. It makes people uncomfortable outside of Rwanda when after 14 years, and then he carries on
where they're maybe not used to that idea. What would you say to the rest of the world who's commenting on what's happening in Rwanda right now? What would your message be to them?
I find it amusing that you start with, all the positives that his system of government or his presidency has brought. And then you come out and say, well, people are uncomfortable. What exactly are they uncomfortable about? The fact that there are clean streets, that there's good Wi-Fi, that there's security, that there's women's empowerment. What exactly is their issue?
Longevity, I think, is their issue. I know it's their issue.
Okay. So their issue is that he's going to continue doing a good job? Like, I'm very confused.
You're not confused. You're playing devil's advocate. You're not confused. What would be your message to them? You've read the articles, you know the stories, you know what people are commenting about Rwanda. You're not confused. You're being disingenuous. What would be your message to the rest of the world about this?
Well, I'll just say, let the Rwandan people speak. And if they speak, hear them. That's pretty much it. I will not presume to get into issues beyond our borders. The Rwandan people can deal with their own local problems. And that's what I guess we're trying to do by this referendum tomorrow.
Sure. We're watching that with great interest. Nigel and Patience and Simon and Sunny, thank you for hashing this. It's an old chestnut, an old African chestnut. Thank you for hashing it out with us once again here on the stream. I enjoyed your company. Omar, where do you want to leave us?
I'll leave you with a couple of competing thoughts from Rwanda. We have Positive Rwanda says, we want Kagame to set an example not by stepping down, but by continuing to transform Rwanda. And on the other hand, we have Keri, who is from Burundi, says, a presidential term is a temporary privilege with a clear expiry date. When we start playing with expired products, we get sick.
I love that Africans have been debating backwards and forwards. No outsiders, just Africans. Oh yeah, and then Omar. But he lives close. That's okay. Thank you very much, guests. It's been a pleasure having you on the stream today. Take care, everybody.
How's that? Yeah, oh my God. Exhausted, right?
Yeah, it's basically hard to say simply yes or no. I'm for or I'm against. Because it's so conditional where the country has to start to create a country in terms of the political, the system, voting system, and governance system. So the one for African continent obviously should be different from the one in Asia, one in Europe, one in US. As someone's mentioned in the video, the Europe has historically some advantage to start these issues because they maybe fortunately for Europe and unfortunately for African, then they have been eating without creating something by themselves. They could take the pull out some products from Africa. The condition is different. Then Asia is also their own history to reform or to rebuild up the countries. Then when you look at Africa, then they are struggling to maintain or get by as a country, as a nation, especially under the colonialization from Europe. So it's quite different condition, and one idea could be that Africa have to climb up more premature, socially premature situation than the one in Asia, one in Europe. So they might have to have some president who is able to run for a long time, but also someone says the governance is also important, but when and how to make a transition from the stage of the governance and second stage of the governance. So it's still have to say yes or no.
By the way, how do you think about this video? What is the problem? What is the problem of the content?
The problem, I feel is, so each, those who have their opinion has been coming only along their opinion. So this may be Anchor. She may have to integrate, or the discussion has to be more prepared. What is the discussion point? What is the condition? Talk about these issues.
Right. Okay. Well, what is the issue for discuss?
Yeah, the someone is saying, even before discussing about the presidential term limit, he wants to address how the country's social aspect of for the individual local person that should be, like educational cleanness and some securities. He's always talking about just discussing from the president's presidential term limit is not reasonable, no meaning. The discussion have to start from the one to address the issues of the students. But no matter how that situation is, the life for the local person is strongly related to the political system, and how long the term limit is. So those discussion is technically, it should be connected.
Right. Okay, my opinion is one point. They didn't discuss about those Rwanda and any other countries. They never talking about authoritarian regime or democracy like that. What is the best government is supposed to be? They just Takahashi, you mentioned, I agree with that. They not only talking about term only, but also they need to consider for the infrastructure and housing and school and so forth. And then I think they need to discuss more about what kind of regime or what is the best way how to govern the country. So they need to much more focus on. And this lady commentator need to more carefully prepare to consider what the result is supposed to going to be. She didn't think about what the result is supposed to going to be. Just free discussion, everybody. Right? So this this is my concern. Okay? So anyway, this video is very difficult to listen, especially for lady lawyer. Almost impossible to listen what she said. Okay?
Yeah, I think my impression is, if the local government, each country has a government, then they decided to make a referendum to change constitution to extend the limit. Then that decision itself is that voting rate itself is not the problem, because as long as the president or head of the country is doing well, then as someone says, as an example, to look at the Mali, the country has strict time limits, but the country is not doing well. So if the country is not prepared to make periodical transition of the power, then someone may have to take longer time to build the infrastructure of the country in terms of the political system and social infrastructure system. So, to extend the limit itself is not a problem with some situation of the country. Then some country may need longer time of the presidency. Yeah. So the point is how to shift the system. Just rely on one person to lead the country to some extent point of the system, and to change to the new system where anyone can be the president, anyone can run for the presidency.
Okay, let's move on. And we're going to change the issue.
Unno-san, just a moment.
Okay, go ahead.
She, lawyer, she speak about Africa Union. I don't think Africa Union has power, but she has a hope, a little bit of hope of the Africa Union. Is there any power of the African Union? I think that the African Union is just a country group.
No, they have military, and they have influential for each country in Africa, but not like so. That's the reason Gaddafi think more strong unification. But the African Union is loose relationship among 54 countries. But the Gaddafi thought the more stronger connection among each country. Okay, so still they have opinion leader to influence African countries. Some countries they have genocide, or some countries have strong, just strife or civic war, or in this case is African Union will involve and try to. Also, they have another organization, South Africa organization, East Africa organization. Probably they have the other organization they themselves, and also the involvement is you have see America. They have America military in Africa kind of organization they have. So those America, but America cases they are not sending army. They are sending advisor or training supporter, so forth. Not military, not like a Middle East, but they have organization. And France is a former colonial country. They send troops to the country, like a Mali, or like a sort of former French colonial countries. So many organizations involved for African countries. This is some cases good direction. They are going to some cases bad direction, like France and America thinking about they try to get like a resource, like Libya cases, and the other cases also they're looking for some try to get resources. So depend on what this kind of situation is going on. The problem is every African country they are not very heavy skill for how to manage country. This is a problem. Not democracy, not authoritarian. No, they don't know how to manage a country itself. This is very weak to organize country. This is a problem. So my recommendation for Africa, only like a China, no, they try to get profit, or they try to how to do in business, China. They are not interested in how to manage a country. Also, they are not interested in ideology. And British and America, okay, they are still sticking to neo-colonization kind of approach. American part is a good example. Exactly, that's like colonization, right? Only Japan is different. Japan is they are very pure mind. They try to support to the African country without any national interest. So Japan is a very strange country anyway. So this is why Japan has opportunity to improve African countries. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
So let's move on. The next is just I said. Europe sucks wealth from Africa. Colonization. How the European divided Africa. Okay, just read some sentences. The white man came to Africa as missionaries and explorers, but were soon sitting on a table dividing Africa amongst themselves. Here's a peep into how Europeans looted Africa of its wealth and sovereignty. Of Africa of its wealth and sovereignty. Of it, looted Africa of its. Okay, scramble for Africa. Scramble for Africa is kind of colonization of Africa. The occupation, division, and colonization of Africa territory by European power during the period of new imperialism between 1881 and 1914. It is also called the partition of Africa, and by some, the conquest of Africa. In 1870, only 10% of Africa was under European control. By 1914, it had increased to almost 90% of the continent, with only Ethiopia, Abyssinia, the former name of the country, the Dervish state, present-day Somalia, and Liberia still being independent. Berlin Conference of 1880, this famous meeting, Berlin Conference in 1884, which regulated European colonization and trade in Africa, is usually referred to as the starting point of the scramble of Africa for Africa. Consequent to the political and economic rivalries among the European empires in the last quarter of the 19th century, the partitioning or splitting up of Africa was how the Europeans avoided warring amongst themselves of Africa. The later years of 19th century saw the transition from informal imperialism, hegemony, by military influence and economic dominance to direct rule, bringing about colonial imperialism. Okay. Partition Africa. Partition Africa is the same as just I said, scramble for Africa, the same meaning. Okay, so I just explained about 1880 to 1912. They just divided Africa for European countries. これは結構長いビデオですね。アフリカ植民地化の歴史で1895年ゴールドコーストの方がイギリスに降伏した。各国の入植者たちは現地人を無視して入植している。1901年ケニアに鉄道が敷設された。原住民反対すれば殺された。 1915年には400万エーカーの農地が1000人のイギリス人入植者になってから。これね、同じことがね、1910年の日韓併合で、1910年ね。日韓併合で同じことが行われたんですよ。だから僕の書いた慰安婦ね、あれみんな嘘なんですけど、でもね、同じようなことはね、日本の政府はね、朝鮮人の土地を取り上げたんですね。だから朝鮮人の土地は取り上げられた農民どうしたかっていうと、娘や奥さんを女郎屋に売って、売るしか方がなかった、生きていけなかったんですね。同じことがアフリカでも起こったんですね。もしくは逆に、朝鮮でも同じことが起こったんですね。で、だから、1920年にはその地域の現地人の半数がその入植者のために働いて、朝鮮も一緒ですよね。農業種だったのが小作人になったっていう意味です、これはね。ナイジェリアでは白人の入植者いなかった。どうしてかっていうと、現地の王様に管理させたんですよ。これはね、うまくいったんですよ。イギリス人がね、常駐してますけどね、イギリス人を移民させなかった。監督だけして、税金を取っただけ、送金しただけ。フランス領セネガルは、これはフランスっていうのはですね、これ、同化政策って、シミライゼーション。同化するんですね。フランス語を教えて、フランスの文化を移植してっていうのが、フランス人が現地の人と結婚してっていうのが、同化政策ですね。で、イギリス人はアフリカ人をイギリス人のような扱いをしなかったけど、フランス人は現地の人をフランス人として育成したっていうけど、しかしながら、1926年では150万人セネガル人のうち、わずか4万8000人しかフランス国籍を認めなかった。1914年に初めてセネガル人がパリの国王。だから、差別はしたんですね。で、日本はね、どっちかっていうとフランスの同化政策に近いですよね。だから、日本を崇拝する人は優遇されたんですね。で、独立しようとする人は迫害されたんですね。朝鮮ね。フランスも同じですね。だから、後でこれまたリビアじゃなくてアルジェの独立の話がアルジェの時話しますけど、アルジェを独立しようとした人はもう本当に迫害されて拷問されたんですね。でも、フランス人になろうとしている人は優遇されたんですね。で、第一次世界大戦では20万人が徴兵された。17万人全身に加えた。その数千人は戦死した。で、これ第一次世界大戦で戦争20万人、17万人いったんです。この時はやっぱり、白人も黒人も差別なく、仲良くやったんですね。で、1929年に大恐慌が起こった。で、この時に食品の輸出価格が暴落したんですね。アフリカは食品輸出してましたから。ゴールドコースのココアも暴落したんですね。で、もともとこれアフリカは、戦後もそうなんですけども、トランスファープライスって言って、中国と日本でもよくやりましたけど、要するに、輸出価格を低く抑えたんですね。だから農民がどんな働いても儲かんないような値段を設定してですね、輸出業者がね。で、アフリカ人商人いたんだけど、結局、白人が全部彼ら駆逐してですね、政策的に。で、欧米が保護して、白人をね。で、結局輸出する価格をとんでもなく安くして、どんなに黒人が働いても儲かんないような価格を設定して、輸出したんですよ。戦後もそうです。戦後も。で、戦後はね、ちょっと違うのはね、今度は輸出よりもね、トウモロコシとか綿花はアメリカがね、補助金付けの綿花とかトウモロコシね、ものすごい安いから、米をアフリカに持ってきたんですね。そうするとアフリカの農業は、やっていけないわけですよ。そんな安い、食品が入ってきた。で、結局アフリカは 米とかトウモロコシとか綿花ってなくなっちゃったんですね、産業が。で、そういうことをね、白人はやったんですね。あと、コンゴのゴム裁判っていうのは、これもね、採集量が少ないと手とか足を切っちゃったんですね。で、これ一番ひどかったのはコンゴですね。コンゴって一度ベルギー領になる前に王族がね、コンゴをね、占領してたんですよ。それはね、本当にひどく、こういうふうに手足切ってあんまりひどいんで、で、国際的に問題になって、で、ベルギー政府がコンゴを監視することになったんですね。で、フランス領赤道アフリカ。これは僕、まだやってませんけど、やる予定ですけど、鉄道ですね。で、12万5千人、1万4千人が命を落とした。鉄道ってのはやっぱりみんないっぱい死ぬんですよね。1920年代には、じゃあアフリカ全土の鉄道。これは鉱物をね、運ぶために鉄道を作ったんですね。で、南ローデシアの鉱山では、30年間で3万人死んでる。落盤ですよね。ごめん。疫病だ。金鉱山では8700万ポンドを毎年生産しているが、30年間で週あたり20人が死んでいる。ローデシア。1930年になると急激に出稼ぎ労働が増えて地域の崩壊をもたらした。特にポルトガル領、アンゴラとモザンビークは労働環境がひどかった。綿花の生産で販売価格を処分し、政府が価格を低く抑えて、生活は貧しい。で、それでもね、不思議なんですよね。アフリカって一夫多妻で、食べるに困ってるのに妻を2人3人も持ってたんですよね。で、安い給与と土地の収奪、弾圧によって、現地から利益を収奪したと。今でもみんな貧しいんですね。今でもね。今ね、植民地政策じゃないんだけどね、現地の政府がね、例えば鉱山でもどうやって運営していいかわかんないから、イギリスとかね、フランスに依存するでしょ。で、現地の政府がフランスとイギリスの鉱山の経営者と、賄賂で結託して、で、国民に一切還元しないで搾取するっていうから、まあ、一人当たりの GDP が400ドルとか500ドルのままなんですね。だから、結局、いや、金鉱山とかダイヤモンド鉱山の人たちが悪いんじゃなくて、政府の役人と結託して、お互いに儲けようね、みたいな悪巧みをしちゃうんですね。だから、国民が貧しいんですよね。それをやってない国はやっぱり豊かですよね。で、この時代に、何？
そういうことやってない国は
ありますよ。ありますよ。ボツワナはなんかできたかな？ものができたところ、ボツワナはまあいい国だよね。それからね、いくつかあるんですよ、国が。小さい国がね。
ボツワナって小さいところですよ、
ね。そう。いくつかあるんですよ。今ちょっと覚えてませんけど。それはね、大統領がいいやつなんですよ。大統領がいいやつは、汚職のない国は反映するんですよ。でも大抵汚職でね、ダメ。
ボツワナってあれ資源がないところでしたっけ？
多分ね。でもあれはいい国。
それが功を奏してるってことですよね。資源がやっぱり搾取されちゃって、骨抜きにされちゃうわけですよね。
カガメのところはいい。カガメちゃんとやってますよね。あれ資源なかったかな？ルワンダ？カガメ。それからひどいのはやっぱりあれだよね。南アフリカは今度、ズーマやめたけど、ズーマひどかったですよ。今度の、次の大統領はいい大統領ですよね。南アフリカ。南アフリカね。今度いい大統領。で、ジンバブエは、ムガベが降りて、ムガ、なんとかなんとかっていうのは、次の大統領だけど、あれはひどいですね。ムガベと同じ無地なですね。だから全然、ジンバブエ良くならないですね。南アフリカ、今度は良くなりますよね。大きな国で言えばね。
そう。いや、なんかヨーロッパの、もう植民地ではない と思うんですけど、その経済的なというかビジネスとしてのそういう影響力は依然として強いわけで、そんな中で、国を立て直そうっていう時に、定期的に選挙をやって、なんだかんだっていうのは本当に現実的なのかっていうのはちょっとわからないですね。とはいえ、そういう状況から脱することができるのかと、それもやっぱり現実的じゃないような気がするんで、なかなか難しいです。
僕、アフリカ何カ国もやったんですけど、もうじき終わりますけどね、プレゼントのタームのリミットなんて関係ないですね。それは問題なくて、要するにね、いいやつが長くね、10年も20年も大統領やってればいい国になるんですよ。カガメみたいに。ね。ダメなやつが長くやってるから、ムガベみたいなね。ムガベ最初良かったんだ。ただあの人、経済だけ良くしてさ、政治一切やらなかったから、で、奥さん、変なのもらっちゃったから変なのになっちゃったんですよね。だから、いいやつが大統領やってれば、もう死ぬまでやってほしいんですよね。だからもうさっき出てきた中でなんだっけ、誰だっけな、ムセベニはね、反対派迫害したりさ、選挙不正やったりしてんだけど、彼はね、国のことを真剣に考えてやってるように思うんですよ。一生懸命僕は調べたんだけど、多分そうだと思うんだ。ね？でもね、西側諸国の人が見たらね、もう選挙はいい加減でやって、相方を殺しちゃったりなんかやったりしてるんですよ、きっと。で、とんでもないって言うけど、そんなことないんですよね。自分がやらないと国がダメになると思って、真面目に不正をやってるんですよね。そういう国は僕は、多分そうだと思うな、ルワンダか？多分それはそれで僕はいいと思うんですよね。だから、非常に難しいの、このどう評価するかね。で、しかも、日本人ってのはやっぱりアフリカなんか関わらないから、わかんないんですよ。この国がどうなのか。東南アジア大体わかりますよ、この国はどういう国かね。近いから。でもアフリカはね、難しいですよね。評価するのがね。次はだからなんかココアの話出てますよね。で、ココアで販売価格、要するに販売価格ものすごく抑えてるから、農民いくらやっても儲かんない。で、これエリートがね、上げるような運動したんだけど、農民がね、無教養でバカだから、わからないからってうまくいかなかったんですね。で、これはゴールドコーストですね。それが最後にイタリアやエチオピアを占領してしまう、わずかに独立をしていた国が占領されてしまったので、アフリカの人たちはこの日を機会に独立の機運が高まった。単語、トレーディング、これ長いビデオです、きっと。トレーディングポスト。カーブアップ。これは分化するっていうのはその地域をね、カーブアップ。ライバルリー。シェイクアウト。これは初めてね、スティープルチェイス。聞いたことないね、スティープルチェイス。トロード。これトレードの過去形ね。トロード。ギブアウェイ。これしょっちゅうで。ヒンダーしょっちゅうで。インペディメント。これしょっちゅう出ますね。イラシナルしょっちゅう出ます。コンテンプト。これもしょっちゅう出ます。サーベージズ。これもしょっちゅう出ます。ヒム。これもしょっちゅう出ます。ホームワールドクリスチャンソルジャーズ。これソングだよね。ヘデン。あんまり出ないね、ヘデン聞かない。タイディングス。デリバレイト。ブランダー。しょっちゅう出ますね。これはインメイト。これしょっちゅう出ます。これインメイトって韓国に入っている人の意味もあるのね。インメイト。rejoice。pacification。hammering。hacked。take refuge, chase off, the able-bodied. これは知らないな、the able-bodied. poll tax. どうかな。lodging content retainer。これも時々出ますね。忘れちゃうけどね、意味ね。pageantry。これあんまり知らない。pageantry だね。pageantry。outline。あんまり出ない。course。これ使うね。enrich。emulate。これもしょっちゅう出ますね。emulate。emulate。repatriation。あ、これしょっちゅう出ますね。repatriation。dignity。もちろんいっぱい出ますね。paternalism。これもしょっちゅう出ますね。absolve。blessing。concession。これしょっちゅう出ます。concession。embattled。plunders。swallow。マーセナリー。これ意外と多いですよね。このマーセナリーっていうのは。傭兵ね。マーセナリー。コンスクリプト。これもよく出ます。コンスクリプト。中東ね、英語の資料にとコンスクリプト。これも出ます。エントレンチ。リンチピン。これも出ますよ。リンチピン。ペイガン。これは時々だな。これは出ないね。veterinary。veterinary。あんまり出ないね。groundnut。これもあんまりいかないね。cheat。bore。bear。agony。repulsive。repulsive。どうかな。terrify。appalling。あ、これしょっちゅう出ますね。primitive。maze。これね、意外と出るんですよね。イギリス英語で maze ね。elude。これも出ますね。長いね。enclose。incessant 今。incessant ね。political dissent。sow。so。fairly。keyway。clamor。evident。revival。snuff out。indignation。これしょっちゅう出ますね。indignation。長いね。長いね、このビデオね。やっぱり、植民地の歴史だからね。長いです。maybe 30-40 minutes? なんで？あ、手切られたりしてるとこに出てくるからね。何分？50秒。Oh my God, beautiful minutes. 今日終わらないね。
The west coast of Africa, looking today much as it did 100 years ago. At that time, the old evils of the slave trade had become a distant, though disgraceful, memory. but there now opened a new chapter of confrontation along these tropical shores. In past years, Europeans had come here for profitable business. Now they wanted more, much more. Old trading posts, like this one, had long been the scene of a partnership between maritime traders from Europe and local Africans. By the 1880s, that old partnership was being swept away in a dramatic change, the outcome of a new European drive for overseas empire. Industrialized countries led by France and Britain had begun to invade the Black Continent, each hoping for new sources of raw materials for its factories, new markets for its manufactures, and new positions of advantage against its rivals. This was called the Scramble for Africa. By 1914, only 2 countries remained outside European possession, Liberia in the west and Ethiopia in the east. Britain had seized the lion's share of control. Egypt and the Sudan in the north, the immense wealth of South Africa, valuable colonies like Rhodesia and Kenya, and richly populated territories such as Nigeria and the Gold Coast. France had invaded Algeria in the 1830s. Now, after new wars of conquest, she added more colonies to her empire south of the Sahara, including the island of Madagascar. Little Portugal carved out 2 vast colonies, Angola and Mozambique, while Imperial Germany took the Cameroons and southwest Africa, and on the east coast, Tanganyika. The vast Congo basin fell to King Leopold of the Belgians. Italy and Spain completed the enclosure. The fate of the continent was utterly changed. Between the colonizing powers themselves, the carve-up was peaceful, but their rivalry was intense. In 1884, a congress of the competing governments met in Berlin to settle their disputes. Germany's Iron Chancellor Bismarck was there. And active behind the scenes was the ambitious Belgian king. He spoke for them all when he said, "I am determined to get my share of this magnificent African cake." Any power that could occupy African soil could effectively claim it. Now the task was to stake out frontiers in utterly uncharted land. Said the French Prime Minister, "We have embarked on a gigantic steeplechase into the unknown." The British Prime Minister Lord Salisbury was to say of this period, "We've been engaged in drawing lines on maps where no man's foot has ever trod. We've been giving away mountains and rivers and lakes to each other, only hindered by the small impediment that we never knew exactly where we were." The great game was to get hold of places and positions of advantage over rivals, no matter what irrational frontiers might result. One of the most absurd cases was the magnificent Gambia River. Britain had long held Bathurst, Banjul today, and was determined to keep this river route to the interior. But France, invading from the west coast, enclosed all the territory surrounding the Gambia River in her new colony of Senegal. So the French were naturally eager to obtain the Gambia River. They offered Britain, in exchange, the much larger and richer Ivory Coast. But the British Parliament insisted on keeping the Gambia, dividing the peoples of the region. And the result was, and is, a country that is 300 miles long, but never more than 30 miles wide. What the African inhabitants might think of this colonial carve-up was never asked. The European idea, in the words of one British governor, was to seize African territory and then, as much as possible, rule the country as if there were no inhabitants. In fact, European contempt for Africans now reached new depths, and no wonder. For how otherwise than by asserting that Africans were helpless children, lazy savages could Christian Europe justify taking their countries away from them? The helpless children, meanwhile, sang their own version of a famous hymn. Onward, Christian soldiers, into heathen lands, prayer books in your pockets, rifles in your hands. Take the happy tidings where trade can be done. Spread the peaceful gospel with the Gatling gun. The European invasions were widely resisted. Conquest was never easy. And sometimes, as these old drawings and photographs testify, conquest led to a ruthless killing that later generations would prefer to forget. Resistance took many shapes. In French West Africa, a focal point was found in Muslim loyalties. Many heroes, still unforgotten, came on that scene. Some, like the Senegalese religious leader Ahmadou Bamba, offered the way of peace, but were still sent into exile. Others, like the fierce warrior leader Samori, fought off French attack after attack, and was crushed and exiled only after years of war. Death took many, strong or weak. With the skulls of earlier wars displayed in their capital, Kumasi, the powerful Ashanti nation ruled over most of modern Ghana. Led by their kings, who had the title of Asantehene, they'd long defended their country against Britain, but now they desperately wanted a peaceful settlement. In 1895, fearing a disastrous war with Britain, King Prempeh made a strong bid for peace from his palace here at Kumasi. He offered the British the right to establish in Ashanti a chartered company with all the concessions, the privilege that such a company could possibly desire. But it wasn't enough, for the British now wanted territorial possession as well as privilege. The Ashanti nation had already fought long, hard battles against the British, but this time, in 1896, they decided to surrender. In a ceremony of deliberate humiliation, the king was made to kiss the British commander's boot, and then sent into exile. But it wasn't the end of the story. The British now blundered. A new British governor, Sir Frederick Hodgson, decided that he had to get possession of the sacred golden stool, symbol of the Ashanti nation's soul. Arriving at the British fort here in Kumasi, he ordered the assembled chiefs to hand the stool over. Worse still, he demanded the right to sit on it, something that no person had ever been allowed to do, not even the king himself. To Hodgson's final insult, the Ashanti replied with war. This little fort at Kumasi is what the British had built, just in case, and now they sorely needed it. The few dozen British inmates of the fort were besieged for months, and had to eat rats to stay alive. Hodgson's act of folly had exacted a bitter price. Efforts to send in relief from the coast were repeatedly frustrated by Ashanti resistance, until finally the governor and his wife got away to the coast, and the absurd but tragic affair could be closed. This ended war between Britain and Ashanti, and a year later, in 1901, the British quietly annexed the country, which became part of the colony of the Gold Coast. All over Africa, the new military technology of automatic guns gave easy victories to the invaders. Countless resistors died, many thousands at the single battle of Omdurman in Britain's conquest of the Sudan. Meanwhile, in another part of the Sudan, the French were also scoring victories. For the most part, public opinion rejoiced. For were these not victories over an inferior species, a kind of joke humanity? There were some critics, but not many, and their voice was ignored or silenced. What really mattered was to do down one's European rivals. If you were British, to get the better of the French in West Africa or of the Germans in East Africa, while orphans like little Uganda were left on the protective doorstep of Father John Bull. Even before 1900, there came a new source of conflict: settlers from Europe. French in the far north, Dutch and then British in the far south, and some Germans. Other settlers were attracted to the good farming land of the east, to Tanganyika, northern and southern Rhodesia, and the British territories of Uganda and Kenya. Once again, nobody asked permission. An early French governor had laid down the golden rule. Wherever good water and fertile land are found, he said, settlers must be installed without questioning whose land it may be. The settlers, not surprisingly, agreed. The next step in East Africa was to...
This happened 100 years ago, but actually now is a reverse thing happening. For example, South Africa, 6 million white people, and I'm not sure how many farmers there, but every year some of those are killed by black people. Right? And any other place, some white people, still kind of similar situation. Right?
Build a railway from the coast to the interior. The line was completed in 1901, and millions of acres of good farming land in Kenya were opened to white ownership and settlement for the buying price of next to nothing. These white strangers, oddly enough, were at first welcomed by the African inhabitants. But the welcome didn't last for long, for they soon discovered that colonial government wanted them to give things, above all their land and their labour. These colonial demands provoked a repeated resistance, and against that resistance the colonial government, with white settlers arriving in ever larger numbers from Britain, waged a war with little mercy, and of course with rifles and machine guns against spears and arrows. This beating down of a sometimes violent and desperate African protest was called pacification, or less politely, hammering. A British officer then fighting in Kenya kept a sadly instructive diary.
Marched into Fort Hall, and the expedition comes to an end. To my mind, the people of the Embu have not been sufficiently hammered, and I should like to go back at once and have another go at them. During the first phase of our expedition against the Irieni, we killed 797 niggers, and during the second phase against the Embu, we killed about 250.
There was, in fact, much more of the same thing. In the sixth campaign against the Kenya Nandi, for example, British troops reported killing 1,117 people, besides seizing all their livestock. In 1906, a junior British minister in London cabled this protest: "Surely it cannot be necessary to go on killing these defenceless people on such an enormous scale." The minister's name was Winston Churchill, but on that occasion his intervention had no effect.
Maka kakita makairi gari kwa mata na ku makairi gakewe gatekane kya mudongo mara mare ko makainga to makoreka kwa mese.
By 1915, about 4 million acres of African farming land in central Kenya had been given to about 1,000 British settlers. By the 1920s, about half of the able-bodied men of Kenya's two largest farming peoples, the Kikuyu and the Luo, were working as labourers for British newcomers. How was that done? The answer, once again, was something new in Kenya: taxation. To cultivate these splendid acres, it was necessary to make Africans pay taxes in cash. Having no money economy of their own, Africans could pay tax in cash only if they went to work for a European wage. An old Maasai recalls those early days.
Sasa wazungu walipokaa sasa walianza kutawala. Walipotawala, kitu walitaka kodi. Masai zamani hapana lipa kodi ya kichwa kama ile tunaita zamani potax. Tulikuwa nalipa na nyumba. Tulikuwa naitwa kodi ya nyumba.
The Maasai proved particularly good at dodging the payment of the new taxes. So the colonial government thought it should send some of these apparently idle warriors to school, so as to turn them, if possible, into tax collectors among their own people. Small boys were seized for this purpose.
Sasa serikali walitoa askari yake kuja kuchukua watoto. Sasa mimi ni moja ya wale watoto ambao walishikwa kupelekwa skuli. Sasa nilishikwa nikapelekwa skuli. Sasa pamoja na wale watoto wengine.
On the other side of the continent, in northern Nigeria, the colonial scene was very different. With no white settlers, life was peaceful. Things continued much as before. The British had conquered this huge region, far from the sea, for no real reason other than to keep it from the French. So the British were content with a supervision which allowed them to take a back seat. Under the direction of Lord Lugard, this was called indirect rule. This was the residence of the British official who governed the northern Nigerian province of Kano. Indirect rule meant ruling through local kings, in this case the local emir, who after defeat accepted British overlordship. On condition that nothing was done to modernize or democratize the conquered system, indirect rule was cheap and highly effective. Local kings and princes kept the peace and law and order in their own interest, as well as in that of the British. Both sides, at the top, had much to gain. So kings, like this one, the Emir of Katsina, were able to stay in power and even add to their personal privileges. They were able to call on their own local retainers to govern the everyday affairs of the country. In this way, the native governing class, as the doctrine said, was to remain a real living force, as well as being a curious and interesting pageantry.
The ceremonies are the same as 1,000 years ago. There were kings in northern Nigeria when Richard Lionheart set out on crusade. Today, he and all the emirs of northern Nigeria play their part as subjects of the King of England. But their subjects still show their loyalty as in the days when Katsina was warring with her neighbors. Katsina still keeps her way of life, still resists new influences from the world outside.
In short, no modernization of any kind, and therefore big problems for the future. I talked to Nigerian professor Obaro Ikeme.
For the larger part of Nigeria, British rule did not mean anything for many years. In other words, although at the centers of administration, there was a change which could be seen by the people and felt by the people. In the outlying areas, life went on as if the British did not exist. If you take a look at one particular area, the north, for example, the seat of the emir and the seats of the district heads may have felt the immediate impact of the British presence. But the villages were ordered and run just as before, with one important difference though, taxation. That the people had to pay tax to a new power. The British built up a corps of Africans who became known as native administrators, developed some commitment to the system. The salaries were comfortable. They had power, which they used to enrich themselves at the expense of their followers and their subjects. Consequently, the British were able to succeed largely by developing a core of people who became partners with them.
British officers, headed by a resident, are there in every emirate to advise and assist the emir and his ministers in their day-to-day work. And each month, the resident presides at a full meeting with the emir's council. There may be word from Nigeria's governor in Lagos, or from the colonial office in London, or the council may discuss the repatriation of pilgrims from Mecca.
Just one. Takahashi. Kimoto.
Yes.
Okay. Fukuda.
Fukuda-san, exit Skype.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How about Takahashi?
Right. Fukuda-san's PCs have no battery.
No battery. She's somewhere outside.
No battery.
She's somewhere outside?
She's outside. And she is joining by her PC, but her PC has no battery.
What happened? So she will not come back again.
Yeah, today she is finished to join the unno school.
Okay. Let's continue.
The dignity of the past, the traditions of Katsina, are present in the council chamber.
Here, once more, this time behind polite words, was the essence of colonial paternalism. In the French colonies along the coast, the scene was both the same and different. Dakar, capital of Senegal, actually the little suburb of Rufisque, a charmingly nostalgic place. Senegal was France's oldest colony in tropical Africa, and one where the French presence, like that of the British in northern Nigeria, could easily be absorbed. Generally, the French ran their colonies on much the same system as the British, but there was one important difference. The British thought that their Africans could never become anything but Africans, and certainly not British. The French idea, on the contrary, was that in the end, at some distant time, all their Africans would become black Frenchmen. The culture and the language of France were offered as the eventual supreme blessings. This idea was called assimilation. Originally, this was a generous idea, but colonial rule reduced it to little or nothing. Yet in 4 municipalities of coastal Senegal, assimilation did take effect. This picturesque island of Gorée, just off the port of Dakar, was one. Here you could go to school and even become a French citizen. But you belonged to a tiny minority. By 1926, only 48,000 Senegalese had become assimilated out of a total of 1.5 million. The Senegalese historian, Professor Cheikh Anta Diop, explains.
C'est en fait certain, dans la pratique, ce n'était pas possible. Et dans la pratique, il y a eu 4 communes. Ici au Sénégal et partout ailleurs, pratiquement, c'était le système de l'indigénat. Donc, à cause du rapport numérique, la politique d'assimilation n'était pas applicable sur le terrain.
One man from Gorée Island who did make it and carved out for himself a brilliant career was Blaise Diagne. Of humble origins, Diagne became the first black man to be elected to the French National Parliament in Paris. He campaigned for black rights and began to win concessions. That was in 1914. During the First World War, an embattled France called for tens of thousands of African troops as Flanders swallowed its victims. Blaise Diagne agreed to be France's recruiting sergeant, and his African reputation vanished in the slaughter.
This guy is, I think, he said he wants to go to, it means 1915. It means he's almost 100 years old, eh?
France had long relied on African mercenaries, even as far back as the Crimean War. But now it was different in scale and in suffering. More than 200,000 African troops, mostly conscripts, were sent to France. And at least 170,000 were thrown into the Holocaust of the trenches. Thousands never came home. Others returned with an experience that survivors have still not forgotten.
loxtu ba loxo bi ci la bokk ci dog benn bala ngi bu génn ci fi mu ngi benn bal mu ngi ni buggi bi mer mu ngi ni buggi dal fi génn ci fi mu ngi.
Shoulder to shoulder, white men and black men, equal in the trenches. Were they now to become equal in the colonies? Only the monuments suggested that.
Okay, another 20 minutes. Yeah.
With the coming of peace in 1918, the victorious colonial systems looked more strongly entrenched than ever before, though military rule now gave way to civilian government. This led to a far more thorough system of tax collection to pay for the government. The linchpin of the British system was the district officer.
Where I come in. I'm the district officer in this particular area.
the native authority treasurer sends his figures to me for checking against last year's figures. When it's decided what the tax is to be this year, I go off to tell the chiefs and people what they're to pay and why. That's my wife. I spend so much time doing the rounds that if she didn't come, we wouldn't see much of each other. We take our beds and everything else, as the rest houses where we spend the nights have no furniture. You know, we're very ordinary people, but the pagans still find us a bit of a puzzle with our fuss and bother. That's the local chief. We ask news of the crops and the children. It's like sitting in a shop window. We come here every year and follow the same ritual, but they always behave as though it was the first time. Peace is all very well, but it is dull, and they love a bit of variety.
Many colonial officials were good, practical, hard-working people devoted to their ideals. They were sure that the strong paternal arm of colonial rule must be a blessing for Africans and would have to be continued for centuries. They firmly believed that if left to themselves, Africans would simply go on living as before, and that, they thought, would be a thoroughly bad thing. An old film tells the story as the colonial officials saw it.
This simple life under the hot African sky was once a life of fear and uncertainty.
British rule has brought peace. The enterprise of European officials and settlers and of Indian traders has opened up the country. But there is still a long battle to be fought with ignorance, poverty, and disease.
In these lands, where there are so many changes to be made, much can be achieved by money and the initiative of the white man.
In the more favoured colonies, those were the hopes of the 1920s, and in some respects they were fulfilled. There came the founding of the first modern hospitals, veterinary services, and other benefits of Western life. But all the money to pay for these good things had to come from Africans. So there now began a drive for the export of crops to yield cash. The cash crop era got into its stride. Groundnuts, as here in Senegal, were a crop that brought cash to farmers and to colonial purchasing companies. But the cash crop's success also brought problems.
Il est certain que l'arachide a été introduit pour alimenter tout simplement la culture, la monoculture de l'arachide a été introduite pour des raisons industrielles, ni plus ni moins. C'est en 1848, je crois, que les Marseillais l'ont introduite ici pour fabriquer tout simplement de l'huile pour vendre ça sur le marché international. Et on a spécialisé finalement, la tendance est née de spécialiser chaque colonie en fonction de ce qu'elle pouvait produire le mieux. Et on a donc toutes les zones sahéliennes ont été spécialisées pour la culture de l'arachide, des zones comme la Guinée pour la culture de la banane et le riz, et ainsi de suite. Mais ça, c'était en fonction, non pas des intérêts locaux des indigènes, de ceux qui habitaient ces terres-là, mais en fonction des besoins en matières premières des usines qui tournaient à Marseille, à Bordeaux et en Europe d'une façon générale.
So long as their crops were bought, African growers could be reasonably content. But in 1929 there began the huge and long disaster of the World Depression, and prices collapsed. Food production for local people, already badly hit because of land taken for cash crops, became a subject of major crisis. What was true of the French Empire was just as true of all the others. Here in the Gold Coast, the big cash crop was cocoa, providing the bulk of the colony's exports. The crop was grown and harvested entirely by African farmers, who had to sell it to British and other foreign buying companies. These companies banded together so as to pay the farmers an artificially low price. The farmers of Ghana, then the Gold Coast, nonetheless worked so well that they became the world's biggest producers of cocoa, and so of chocolate, which Africans didn't eat. But the gains were far from equally shared. The Ghanaian historian, Professor Edo Boahen.
There's no doubt at all that the farmers were being cheated. The prices that were being paid for the cocoa bore no relationship to the prices that they had to pay for the imported goods. We had no say in the pricing of our own commodities. We had no say in what we paid for what was imported. This was, in fact, one of the greatest indictments against the colonial economic policies. The fact that so much emphasis was placed on a single cash crop. And we had to import rice, we had to import oil, palm, oil, and so on, to feed ourselves, because so much emphasis and so much attention was paid to this single cash crop cocoa. The colonial governments were just concerned with obtaining raw materials to feed their factories abroad.
The raw materials were produced by the skill and enterprise of hard-working African men and women. Yet the advertisements in Europe, deeply racist by this time, presented an insultingly different picture. At the same time, African businessmen found that the trading positions they had established in earlier times were now swept away.
There's no doubt at all that before the colonial period, Africans were playing a far more important and dominant role in the economy than during the colonial period. There were many of them running their own import-export businesses. In the 1920s and 1930s, all these African merchant princes virtually disappeared from the field because the dice was so much loaded against them as a result of the colonial system. The banks were discriminating against them in the granting of loans. The expatriate firms, and particularly the Syrian and Lebanese firms, were undercutting them, and they just could not stand the challenge, and therefore many of them just simply ran out of business. And the children of these great merchant princes now became the employees of the great African capitalist companies like UAC, UTC, SUA, and so on.
Colonial trading companies, British, French, Belgian, Portuguese, monopolized wholesale business with the full backing of their colonial governments. What King Leopold had called this magnificent African cake was beginning to yield its riches. Often those were painful days, but they have to be recalled by anyone who wishes to understand the problems of Africa now. The turmoil of today in the Congo, or Zaire, has its roots in the infamous Congo Free State of King Leopold. Here the emphasis was on the growing of rubber, and the methods used to extract it were no better than a reign of terror.
Oh, he said Congo Free State is, actually this is Belgium, some lord managed this Congo State. A very harsh management, so just before I told you that finally they Belgian government take over the Congo State.
Local people were forced to collect rubber under the most cruel conditions, as these old photographs show. If the rubber they collected was poor or small in quantity, men, and sometimes women too, could expect to lose a hand or foot in punishment.
Yeah, lose a hand. He showed you.
Terrible things were done. An official British fact-finding commission reported. The daily agony of an entire people unrolled itself in all its repulsive, terrifying details. Public opinion in Europe grew horrified. Gradually, the agonies were reduced. Yet huge damage had been done, moral as well as physical, and was going to cast a dark and violent shadow over the future of the Congo. Forced labor by the 1920s was practiced on a wide scale in most of the colonies. All early roads and railways were built by forced labor. Much was achieved, but the cost in life and health was sometimes catastrophic. This spectacular railway in French Equatorial Africa was built by 125,000 Africans to link the coast with Brazzaville, the inland capital. Beyond doubt, a great feat of engineering. But before a single passenger could travel on it, nearly 14,000 Africans were to die in building it. Travel in comfort came at a price. By the 1920s, the colonial railway map was complete. These lines had one central purpose: to ensure the export of minerals and other wealth, most of all from southern Africa. European mining activity for gold, copper, zinc, diamonds transformed southern Africa, thanks again to African labor acquired by the usual procedure of administrative force and taxation. Conditions were hard to bear. Some 30,000 Africans died in southern Rhodesian mines between 1904 and 1933, mostly of disease. And wages at the end of that period were lower than they'd been at the start. This labor system was called Chibaro. Very old men can still remember it.
Hapana munhu angachiramba vanga vachienda zvavo kuchibharo kuti vata chibharo vaitaulirwa ishe vobvisa vanhu voenda kuchibharo kubasa.
Gold mining boomed. In those years of Chibaro, the southern Rhodesian mining industry produced gold worth £87 million sterling, at the cost of 20 dead African miners each week on average for 30 years. Just as in the bigger mines of South Africa, living conditions for miners were appalling. Safety provisions were primitive. Discipline was often brutal. Healthcare almost non-existent. Prison labor was used whenever available, and that was often. And child labor too.
Takamboenda vakomana so vaenda kuchibharo kwanzi kunodikanwa vanhu kubasa.
After 1930, the whole labor system in large regions had come to depend on people having to abandon their villages and go far away to work in colonial mines or on plantations. This was called migrant labor, a huge upheaval which soon began to destroy the old stabilities of rural Africa. An official British committee in 1935 reported that the old order of society was being completely undermined by migrant labor. The years ahead were going to confirm it. But it was in the Portuguese colonies, especially Angola and Mozambique, that forced labor was at its worst. Here in Mozambique, and by brutal methods, African farmers were forced to grow cotton and to sell it at prices fixed by the colonial government. Prices kept so low that the farmers used to say of the cotton that they were forced to grow that cotton was the mother of poverty. The raw cotton was sent to textile factories in Portugal and returned in the form of shirts for Africans to buy. All the profits were Portuguese. The more the farmers learned to hate cotton, the more they were forced to grow it on pain of severe punishment.
Senzaku lisinzisa tiko hinkwaro akwari byala thonji atiko hila lingasungula kushaniseka hakona avakapataji avafamba amintini nemasin'wini loko bile dina vakhumuka avalandziwa vayatekiwa vabiwa hi tintshilani vaya masin'wini na vangadlanga yixikatoni vandanikhoma sinaje akona wena xikatoni ku theteka vana va hari mukatoni laha ku ba siniyana sinikangatela ni bashipakani xa unharhu swa ringana siva jele 15 days jele
The farmers in this old film had no legal means of protest, but they could express their anger by singing anti-colonial songs in their own language. There seemed then no way out, no hope ahead. And before long, the same disaster struck here as elsewhere. Food crops disappeared, and once prosperous areas were hit by famine.
Unene tindlela tive tikulu nkama lowo ekusa aloku amutini lwangani vasati vambiri vanharhu hinkwavo avanyikiwa masimu ya thonji utani athonji alishakuliwa kanharhu thonji utani akungari na nkama wa kutirha masimu akungari na nkama wa kuveni hi tirha masimu ya hina hi byala mavele leswi fanekelaka ha kona ni leswi hinkwaswo a li karhi hi tirha swona swa ti-fijan ti mavele ni hinkwaswo se a tindlela ti kula hi ndlela yoleyo.
In spite of African suffering, settlers arrived in growing numbers. Some were political exiles from the Portuguese dictatorship. Many were poor people hoping for a better life. Sent out to be farmers, most preferred the easier life of the towns. They opened shops and businesses and aimed at the success which had eluded them at home. This actually suited the official colonial doctrine. The Portuguese dictator Marcelo Caetano laid it down in plain words. The blacks are to be organized and enclosed, he said, in an economy directed by whites.
But at this time, okay, they make cotton farming, right? And very cheap price they need to sell. But after they independent, I told you, American cotton came to the African continent, very cheap price, and finally, cotton agriculture disappeared from all Africa.
Loko nisungula kuvulavula nite kadi mshadori ni sekretari wakwe leswaku a guvernu wa maputukezi I guvernu leyi nga twala misaveni hinkwayo hi vunene bya yona kambe n'wina vadimixiradori mugeni guvernu wa maputukezi Afrika a nga ta va kona hikusa a mu landzanga a swileleto leswi mu nga tela swona Afrika.
Mass resistance was to develop later, but already even the poorest and least educated Africans could see that colonial rule had much more to take than to give. Whatever good may have come from colonial rule has to be measured, unfortunately, against the essential aims of each of the colonial systems. These aims were frankly stated. They were to extract wealth. We've looked at some of the ways in which wealth was extracted, by the use of forced or cheap labor, by the seizure of land, by the incessant pressure on growing crops for export rather than crops for local food needs, and always by the deliberate treatment of Africans as inferior beings. Whatever appearances might suggest, Africans in fact were no longer prepared to accept their permanently inferior status. All over the continent, the first signs of a new political dissent had already begun to appear. In the 1920s, for example, with the protest action of Harry Thuku in Kenya, at the same time with Casely Hayford and his companions in British West Africa. And perhaps above all with Herbert Macaulay, often called the father of Nigerian nationalism. But their demands were small.
Some of these early nationalists were completely taken in by the British system. They thought it was a good thing, and that we should become part of that good thing. And their real pressure was for the British to become a bit more liberal.
During the 1930s, and notably with the rise to prominence of the fiery but very effective Nigerian nationalist Nnamdi Azikiwe, much stronger and more far-reaching demands began to be made. Men like Azikiwe used the press where this was possible, as it was in British West Africa. They now sought a mass audience. Politics moved out of polite drawing rooms into the clamour of the streets.
So the resistance movement took many forms, and it was not confined only to the elite, as some people tend to think. In fact, it was also evident in the rural areas and even among the ordinary farmers and the ordinary workers.
One form of mass resistance took shape in a big cocoa hold-up in the Gold Coast when farmers demanded fairer prices. Once again, the press could be used to good effect.
But unfortunately, in the 1930s, there was never any coordination between the protests of the rural folk and the farmers and the protests being organized by the elite. And this is why the resistance movement was not very successful.
But now in 1935 came a new and savage challenge to African hopes of progress. Another colonial invasion. Fascist Italy's brutal assault on Ethiopia, then called Abyssinia.
No power on earth now seems able to hold up Italy's sweeping advance across Abyssinia's rain-swept mountains. Now Dessie has been captured, and from there a direct road leads to Addis Ababa. So perhaps it's only a question of time as to when the victorious Italian troops will march into the capital, and the emperor will have to sue for peace.
With the colonial powers sounding quite pleased about this invasion, Italy's armies pushed on against a far weaker adversary and bombed and shelled their way to success. But Africans were outraged.
For the first time, the blacks all over the world, this time not even Africa alone, but the blacks all over the world felt that they have been attacked. You know, Ethiopia and Liberia were the only two countries in Africa that were able to maintain their sovereign existence during the period of the scramble and the occupation of the continent by the imperial powers. And Ethiopia therefore became the symbol of hope, not only for Africa, but for all the black peoples all over. Ethiopia was looked upon as the symbol of the revival and the regaining of the independence and sovereignty of Africa. And therefore, when this invasion took place, it meant the complete snuffing out of this last beam of hope.
Italy's troops entered Addis Ababa, capital of a now subjected Ethiopia, and still there came no more than verbal protest from outside powers. Yet Ethiopia's defeat, painfully confirmed when her people laid down their arms, sent out a call for action to Africans everywhere.
Indeed, for some of us, 1935 now is being considered as the more appropriate date for the beginning of the modern nationalist period of African history, rather than 1939 or even 1945, because we believe that but for the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939, probably the struggle for independence would have begun from 1935 as a result of the indignation, as a result of the anger, as a result of the emotions, as a result of the strong feelings of anti-imperialism that were aroused by the Italian invasion of Ethiopia.
Those feelings were aroused above all among the few who could win a modern education at schools like this one, Achimota in the Gold Coast, where Kwame Nkrumah, future leader of the country's independence movement, had been a student. Young people began to read whatever anti-colonial newspapers they could find. Even in the midst of discouraging years, hope flourished afresh. A new generation of educated Africans, some of them trained here at Achimota, was reaching maturity. And then came the tremendous upheavals of the Second World War, surging with revolutionary force through the entire colonial world. By 1945, as we shall see in our next program, the scene was set for great dramas in a struggle for independence.
Okay, that's a very long video. How that? Any opinion?
Get tired to listen.
Yeah, exactly. I'm also tired. But you didn't study before, like kind of history of Africa, right?
Yeah. It's very difficult to learn the African history at once in a short time.
Yes. Yes, right. And next week is another video is State of Independence. Then after that, after World War II, they're going to start independent from 1960. So next week is the scramble of Africa, and they're going to independent. Then independent, after independent, what happened? There are civil war among tribes for 20-30 years. This is another very long video, looks like. Then what's going on? Europe sucks wealth from Africa. This is Zuma's interview. He's fairly speaking out right opinion on this video. Then moving to Africa prefers Chinese regime. Okay, Chinese people coming to Africa, many Chinese for 2006. Okay, this is the next week issue. Still, we're going to have another Africa's independent. Then next is followed on this Chinese coming to Africa. Okay.
Okay. Also, next week, Mr. Sonoda will have a session.
Okay. Okay, next week Sonoda. So this one is 2 weeks later. Exactly.
Therefore, Sonoda session, morning session is Sonoda-san. Afternoon session is Uno-san.
No. Morning is Taiwan.
Taiwan.
Okay, and afternoon is Sonoda session.
Okay, I got it.
Okay. Takashi is there?
Yeah.
You're tired, right? Okay, and you're tired, right? Okay. So today is at 5, okay, 5 o'clock. Today is adjourned. And, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Okay? Takashi is okay?
Yes, okay.
Okay, see you next time.